Okay, good evening. We're going to reconvene open session. 6.0, reconvene open session, procedural business, 5:30 p.m. 6.1, call to order. The Board of Trustees are hereby reconvening open session at 5:39 p.m. And before we move on to our next one, I just want to welcome anyone who's joining us via YouTube this time. Just an update, we're all social distancing here, and we will be wearing our masks, but when one person's talking, we will remove our masks so that people can hear us better, hopefully. We have new audio equipment this time around, so hopefully people can hear us better as well. With that, we'll move on to 6.2, roll call. Trustees to identify themselves by first and last name to formally establish a quorum. We have two board members calling in tonight. Jordan Zarati, trustee area 3, Running Springs, Arrow Bear Lake, Green Valley Lake.
Oh, yeah, I zoned. Okay, Cindy Gardner, trustee area 2.
Natalie Lindemann, trustee area 2.
Now my coffee's really
Sandra Midland, trustee area 1. Leslie Ramsden, trustee area 1.
And we have our quorum. With that, we'll move on to 6.3, Pledge of Allegiance, led by our CHE principal, Mrs. Humphries.
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Moving forward to 7.0, closed session report. 7.1, announcement of reportable actions taken during closed session. Nothing reportable. So we will move forward to 8.0, public testimony. 8.1, public comment period for items listed on this agenda and non-agenda items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the governing board. The public comment period is administered by state law and is a point in the meeting set aside for members of the public to share their opinions with the board. Open meeting laws do not permit the board to engage in dialogue or answer questions. Though it may not take action on non-agenda issues raised at the public comment period, the board, for example, may refer any matter to the superintendent for review or take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. Due to the modified meeting procedures during the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, if a member of the public would like to address the governing board on agenda and non-agenda items within the subject matter of their jurisdiction, an email must be submitted to the Executive Secretary of the Superintendent by 12 o'clock p.m. on June 11, 2020. Written comments will be read aloud and subject to the board's usual time limits for public comments. Decorum. The governing board is interested in the ideas and opinions of all stakeholders and endeavors to incorporate community views into its deliberations and decisions. At the same time, it must be able to conduct its business in an organized and efficient manner, free from material disruption. Therefore, in accordance with Board Bylaw 9323 and Government Code Section 54957.9, audience members may not disrupt, disturb, or otherwise impede the orderly conduct of this meeting. Open meeting laws do not confer any privilege or protection for expression beyond that otherwise provided by law. The public's understanding and cooperation are appreciated. 8.2, audience members. We had one public comment submitted by Rim High Principal Tori Burke, and I will read that right now. The mural committee met with the selected artists and gave ideas for the designs and discussed the old murals and school traditions. From there, the artists created 3 different designs for each of the murals, one for the PAC, one on Highway 18, and the third overlooking the football field, in which the mural committee narrowed it down to 2 options for each location. The 2 mural options for each location were sent out to the staff, community, and students to vote on. The survey was open for a week. Each of the chosen designs won by more than 70% of the vote. Tori Burke, principal, Rim of the World High School. And she also attached, with her public comment, the chosen murals. It might be hard to see, but they look wonderful, and it'll be exciting to see them on our high school. Thank you to Ms. Burke. With that, we'll move on, or any other public comments? I don't believe so, right? Okay, moving on to 8.3, RTA and CSEA representatives. Do we have any statements from RTA?
We do not.
None? How about CSCA?
We do not.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to 9.0, governing board members' reports and announcements. 9.1, governing board members. We're going to start with let's start with our folks on Zoom and get them through first, and then we'll move on to those that are here. Jordana, would you like to start?
Sure. Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so, all right, let me go ahead and start here. Hi, I first want to give a huge thank you to the RIM High administration and staff for their amazingly successful and special graduation ceremony. Our class of 2020 deserved the best we could provide given the circumstances, and RIM High staff stepped up and delivered. In the days following the event, the feedback I got from some graduates and their family members was on how wonderful graduation was. In these tough times, RIM stepped up, and I am so incredibly proud. Changing the subject, over the past several months related to COVID, I've heard time and time again from government officials about how we must allow data to guide us in our decision making, and I couldn't agree more. Our focus, my focus, is making sure that we are providing the best possible of everything for our students and staff. So looking at the data through this RIM school district lens, here's what I've noted. In our state, there has been absolutely no casualties, meaning no COVID-related deaths from school-aged kids. This is from data dating back to when we first started tracking cases. Nobody 18 years old or younger has died from COVID in California. Additionally, California youth represent less than 7% of the positive cases for COVID. This data indicates that they are less likely to come down with the illness, and that it hasn't proven fatal for our youth. And that's wonderful, wonderful news. I do have concerns about the mental health effect the pandemic has had on our school-age kids in California, and I've had difficulty finding local data. Internationally, there is information which is disheartening. Quoting from an article entitled How COVID-19 Impacts Children's Mental Health, I found that on the website kidsdata.org. Researchers, this is quote, researchers in the UK carried out a survey among youth with existing mental health issues to assess how the pandemic and the subsequent restrictions affect them. Although the students understood the need for restrictions like school closures, many reported increased anxiety, problems with sleep, and panic attacks as a result. Key findings indicated that 51% of students agreed that the pandemic had made their mental health a bit worse, and 32% agreed it made it much worse. In that same article discussing China and COVID, quote, reports of domestic violence more than tripled, and increased rates of child abuse, neglect, and exploitation were also reported, end quote. Okay, so I'm inclined to believe that it's probable that restrictive policies related to COVID could pose a greater threat to our students than the disease itself. As we move ahead with determining how we're going to open up in August, we will be taking into consideration the mental health needs of our students, while we also follow necessary protocols to keep our sites as disease-free as realistically possible. We also need to keep our staff safe, especially our staff and students who might be more vulnerable to COVID or might have loved ones at home who are vulnerable. It's a huge challenge. However, if we're strategically focused on processes that protect these people who are most fragile, those people that are most fragile, hopefully we can utilize our limited resources with the greatest possible effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. We'll move on to Dr. Leslie Bramson.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. On June 8th, the California Department of Education released a guidance report on reopening schools, and it's entitled Stronger Together. This document leaves questions that are unanswered as far as I am concerned. The CDC document garnered the assistance in the development of the Guide to Reopening Schools with the assistance of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the California Department of Public Health, and the California Division of Occupational Health and Safety and Health. The government model options were proposed for the reopening of schools, but local LEAs will need to take into consideration many factors before making their final decisions. COVID-19 is a virus, and we don't know what we're fighting against. We will look to the authorities who have knowledge far beyond ours, and I commend Jordana for looking at the data. Additionally, we have been advised to look into other countries who are fighting the same battle. And as an example, South Korea has reopened their schools and then has reclosed them because of resurgence of COVID. Tony Thurman has offered 4 scenarios in his document, Stronger Together. The first is students report 2 days a week for in-person instruction, Monday or Tuesday and Thursday, or Monday and Wednesday, and then everyone is going to have distance learning on Friday. Second model was blended learning model. Half the students would attend in-person classroom for 1 week, and then the students would alter each week. 1 day each week, both classes would be involved in distance learning. The looping structure is our third model from Tony Thurman. Teachers and students would stay together over multiple grade levels, and this tentatively can build a better understanding, they say, between health and safety, and decreasing the risks to students and staff. The fourth is early, late, staggered schedules. These grade levels have staggered and started at dismissal times from AM and PM rotations. Each of these models have significant limitations and would be difficult and expensive to achieve. If we go back to the old normal with some alternations, we risk a spike in COVID-19 and the offshoot illness that young students are experiencing. And until now, we have an extremely low rate of COVID on our mountain. It would take very little to introduce the virus to the mountain, and we must be not only cognizant of the health of our students, but especially our fragile and elderly, myself included. Additionally, on this agenda, the board will be evaluating our superintendent, Michelle Murphy. Mrs. Murphy will be collaboratively evaluated by the board on 4 goals, and as we of the board have developed these for her. And if necessary, the board will identify areas that need to be addressed for continued success. The board evaluation will acknowledge and commend Mrs. Murphy on her accomplishments, and for the information for people that might not have the goals that Mrs. Murphy's going to be evaluated on. It's student learning.
No,
That all students have access to
Leslie.
rigorous
tell her she can't.
Leslie, you cannot share those goals.
That's confidential.
That's confidential information.
Yes?
That's confidential.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you. The River of the World District will be working long and hard to accommodate the needs of our students.
is that your report, Leslie?
Did we lose her?
Caught off.
She's still on.
No, I was in the middle of my last sentence.
Please
Okay.
continue.
River of the World School District will be working long and hard to accommodate the needs of our students and the individuals who facilitate their education. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. With that, we'll move on to Cindy Gardner.
Okay, so I too want to commend the high school and the district office, Michelle Murphy, for really being proactive in trying to make the seniors feel special. Everything from the projection of congratulations, seniors on the PAC, to the Snow Valley. Thank you, Michelle, for setting that up, and Kevin Soames for doing that, where they got to ride to the top of the mountain to take pictures. Crystal Cobb was there, Tori Burke, Dee Nygren showed up, and I just think, and Michelle Murphy, of course, and that was special. I also appreciate, and I want to give a shout out to Riley Gomez, the senior class president, because she really organized, adopted a senior. Thank you to her mom, Crystal Gomez, and Amanda Woodgrift, who really helped get it all, and every single kid from Rim High School and Mountain High School were adopted. And I know that I had fun. I took 6, and I had so much fun shopping. It was like Christmas. I took my little senior sheets and just said, ooh, look at all these things, and I did curbside pickup, and it was awesome. So I want to thank everybody who was involved with that. I want to thank the community for making it special. The boat parade, I don't know who thought of that, because I was not following all the thread, but I just think that was brilliant. So I really want to recognize every single piece and every single person, even if you didn't hear your name, how to make these kids feel special, and maybe they didn't get everything that was normal, but they certainly got some things that were so incredibly special that I think they will remember their entire life. They are truly the COVID-19 senior class, and I think they did brilliantly. And for other things, I've been involved in a lot of CSBA, delegate assembly, special meetings, and SANDADS meetings. I know that with the release of Stronger Together, it, as already indicated by my colleagues, it raises so many more questions that it answers. Instead of taking the responsibility that the state is making recommendations, therefore setting expectations on the district to come up with their plan. So with that, what kind of liabilities do we face? What kind of protections do we have? There are changes in instruction. Is the legislator, is the state going to take this up and say, yes, you can deliver instruction in this way? Attendance, are they going to change the way that we calculate attendance? There are so many questions, and the legislation of the state needs to get this all done, because we can put a plan into place, but if they don't do their job, then technically, are the plans set by school districts actually legal? Are they actually meeting requirements? So there is a lot of work, not just on our level, but at the state level. And I mean, some of the discussion was not only just what has already been about, which is like safety on the campus, but okay, sports. What does that look like? I know that I received an email that there is a committee being formed by CAF, and they've requested CSBA, the California State Board Associations, to send someone to be part of the conversation of what does sports look like? What do we need, I mean, you look at social distancing on a bus. I'm not really sure how you put sweaty athletes on a bus after an away game and make it work. So I know all of my kids were athletes, and so I'm just thinking about how smelly Kira came back from her soccer games.
She'll appreciate it.
And she'll, TMI. But I'm saying is that these are conversations that all districts are facing. At our SANDAPS meeting this week, we talked about the issues that are being discussed at the state and what we still have questions about. A lot of us who rely on transportation, how is that gonna change? How's that gonna change when there is no money being given to us to implement the changes required? As for the budget, there is pushback from the Senate and the Assembly on the governor's revised budget. They do not like the cuts to education, especially that 10% from LCFF. Basically, I'm putting it in a nutshell. They're proposing their own. The Senate has a different set of assumptions than the governor. I'm not gonna get into the nitty gritty, but they disagree on revenue outlook, and they also disagree on federal relief for education. So they're gonna have a chitty chat in the next couple weeks, getting together. It should be really, I wish I was a fly on the wall on that. And hopefully we will have some resolution by the end of the month. Technically, we are supposed to. So we'll see if the Senate and the Assembly win out in reducing the amount of cuts to education. We're all keeping our fingers crossed that they do win out. I know that with uncertainty, the governor wants to play it safe and conservative, but the hits to education and then the subsequent costs of reopening, you just can't do it. When you have small businesses and corporations saying the same messaging and they're not taking the kind of hit that we are, well, and that's not true. Let me rephrase that, because some businesses are really going under. It's just that education can't be funded the way it is. So I'm hoping that the federal government steps up to the plate for additional relief, and I'm hoping that we get some relief from the budget cuts. For everything else, I am just excited about trying to figure out, like a Jenga, how we are going to make next year work without learning gaps. And that is my concern, is making sure that every child has equitable access to the most amazing instruction. And there are going to be challenges with that, no matter what it looks like. Even if our kids are going 100% back into brick and mortar, there are going to be challenges with that. So just making sure that our kids are receiving that instruction for them to go on to the life that they envisioned pre-COVID-19 after high school graduation. I also want to make sure that our staff are feeling safe. I know that some of our staff are very concerned. They're very concerned about their health and how are we going to take care of them. So as we progress and we talk about all the different pieces and the compliance and the safety pieces and all that, we need to make sure that everything is done with compassion and empathy, and the goal of providing the best access to equitable education opportunities for all. So that's a conversation. We have a great retreat coming up, and this is definitely high priority for the board. So thanks, peace out.
Thank you, Cindy. Moving on to Dr. Natalie Lindeman.
Thank you. I wanted to begin by thanking everyone involved in the district, students, parents, staff, for just getting through this unique and challenging year. We made it, so I think we have a moment to now plan and prepare for what next year is going to be looking like. And we've been talking about it since closing, what opening is going to look like, and there'll be part of the meeting later on today where we're going to all have a discussion about that too. But I just really appreciate how flexible people were and how dedicated people were at continuing to keep up with education in these, again, challenging times. Graduation was amazing. It was my 20th year reunion or anniversary from graduating. So it was always fun to be on the grass and on the field, and this was a strange one. I mean, we're not gonna forget it, but all of the teachers and staff at the high school did a marvelous job. Principal Burke, the senior class advisors, Ms. Markovich and Mrs. Cobb, just did everything they could to make it special, and we did get really great feedback from the community about it. There were parts of this graduation that were better than what a traditional graduation is, and moving forward, if we are ever able to have a traditional graduation again, I think incorporating some of what we learned through this experience would be a good idea for us. The students got to have a lot more interaction with their families, and I think it made it more intimate and special for them. The families are graduating too, they put in all this hard work, and usually they're, so far in the stands, crowded, and can barely snap a decent picture of their kid, let alone be able to hug them and take pictures with them and have special, balloons or decorations specifically for your students. So there were parts of it that were really special. I also appreciate how our community really showed up to recognize our seniors and our graduates. They just rallied. I noticed businesses, Jensen's, Goodwin's, McDonald's, had signs that said congratulations to our graduates. I don't know if those are every year or if it was special this year, but I noticed them this year. Sarah Ullman is actually who started the organization of the boat parade. So yay, Sarah, for that. The buses in the parking lot was another thing that Ms. Burke did that was really great, but the Adopt a Senior program, the candy bouquets from the class officers, and then a little kind of one that many people might not have known about is Goodwin's did donate fresh flower leis to a few of our graduates that counselors had identified, might really appreciate that honor, so I wanted to give them a shout out. The other thing I want to transition into talking about is our upcoming election in November. We have 3 school board seats that are going to be on the ballot in November. One of those areas is currently vacant, so what that means is there's no incumbent who lives in that area at this time. If you guys recall and have been coming to board meetings, you're probably aware that we had to redraw our voting parameters in order to be in compliance with state voting guidelines. And the new map, which it's also identified as scenario 2B, again, that's scenario 2B up on the top, is the one that was voted under. You can go to the district website and under the school board tab, you can see what that map is. Area 1, Area 3, and Area 5 are the ones that are going to be up for election. The vacant area right now is Area 1, and that's roughly where Goodwin's and Lake Drive are in Crestline and moving down through VOE and Cedar Pines Park. But again, you can go to the website to specifically look at that. So if anybody's listening, we need, that might be interested, we need people to step up and run for that position. Anyone who wishes to run for an open position must file with the San Bernardino County Registrar of Voters, and they can do that from July 13th through August 7th. You can go on their website and find the candidate filing guide that will explain how to do that. However, the one that's up there as of today at 2, when I double checked, is for the March primary.
Yeah.
Usually when it gets closer to July, it will be the candidate filing guidelines for the November election. So you can take a look there. If you have any questions for board members who have ran and won and you want to know how to kind of go through that process, I'm sure we'd all be happy to help you out with that. Something important for the community to be aware of, which I do think we talked about several times, but in the last election for school board seats, it was set up so everyone voted for every open seat. In this election, you will only be able to vote for the seat that is within your boundaries. So each resident will be voting for one board member, and that will be the one that represents their boundaries. And we always talk about how we all represent the community as a whole, but the state does require we do elections this way, and this is how we're complying. So again, any questions on that, please reach out to us, and the map is on the website. Again, possible plans for reopening we will be discussing as a team shortly, so I know we're all anxious about kind of looking at that and talking about how Tony Thurman's plans or recommendations are, what of those are reasonable and feasible for our district, and what of those are desired by our community. So my big thing is, to the best of our ability, having options for families is something important for me. So that's it for my report today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lindemann. And we'll move on to my board report then. And I have something not so fun to talk about, and that's our school finances and our budgetary outlook. Thank you so much to Cindy Gardner for laying that framework and laying down some perspective of what we're looking at financially ahead of us. It's not going to be easy, and it's really important to know that our legislators are still actively in the process of negotiating our school funding for the next school year. So in essence, to put it in the simplest terms possible, our funding's in danger, and we need to do everything that we can to get a fair shake from the state. And we're going to be asking the community to help us out with that. Your school board's written already an advocacy letter to send to our elected legislators, State Senator Mike Morrell and Assemblymember Jay Obernolte. And we will publish a copy of that letter so that everybody can see what your school board's written to our elected officials to, in terms of what we're asking for them, in terms of financial support. And we're also going to be asking for your support in helping us protect and increase our district's funding. We'll be publishing some community advocacy letters that you can take and use as a sample to send off to Senator Morrell and Assemblyman Obernolte. And you'll see more of those details soon. We'll get them all published very shortly. I would like to end a little bit more on a positive note and say congratulations to our Rim High and Mountain High grads. You truly pulled off the ultimate senior ditch day. I'll say that. It will go down in history as probably the best senior ditch day of all time. And I know that your graduation wasn't what you expected, but hopefully everything that our community has done, not just our district, but really the community, and that's something that each of us has brought up already, hopefully that made it special enough. I wish you success and above all happiness. And with that, I'll turn it over to our Superintendent, Michelle Murphy. 9.2 Superintendent Report.
Good evening. I'm going to keep my report short because I'll be doing a lot of talking coming up for a presentation on reopening schools. So I would just like to echo the board sentiments for a thank you for our high school staff and our students for their end of the year activities and graduations and gifts, and thank you to Snow Valley and Kevin Soames for working with me to provide the ski lift opportunity. We had 60 graduates ride the ski lift, so they've asked for that to become a tradition. It was interesting to note that some of our students had never ridden the ski lift, so that was their first opportunity to ride it, so that was very special for their families. I would like to say I'm continuing to work with AXA on a professional learning network with 6 other superintendents across the state to provide distance learning documents as guidelines for other districts. We're about halfway through with our work, and we have 3 more weeks of meeting and work to do before we hopefully will have some documents published to help other districts with distance learning. I'd like to thank our coaches at the high school who have submitted to Mr. Beal some plans for practicing and following COVID guidelines, and we'll be reviewing those so that it is our desire that sports and school continue in a fashion or close to a fashion in which we're used to. So thank you to those that have worked on those, and I'm going to save the rest for my report. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. With that, we'll move on to 10.0, reports and presentations. 10.1, principal update. Marlene Humphreys, Charles Hoffman Elementary Principal.
Yay, Mrs. Humphrey. It's coming.
Magically
It's
appears.
pulling up.
Oh,
It's there.
Should we turn one light off? Or are we good?
Can we see it, Mark?
Can we turn half the
You
lights
can turn
off?
half them off.
Okay.
It's one of those 2 buttons right there.
Well, good evening, school board members and district leadership. It's a pleasure to be invited to speak tonight about Charles Hoffman Elementary. There we go. Indeed, what a year it has been, because we have had to change the way we educate our students over the past 3 months, and looking into the future may continue to be a possibility. But if we return to August, we can see what the raccoons have been up to this year. We were striving to fulfill our 3 site goals, which are aligned to the district: to improve student learning and increase professional development, to facilitate safe and positive school culture, and to engage family and community. at goal number 1, we examined our CASP data as a staff in teams with the school site council, and we instituted some changes. We showed a decline, and we analyzed why we made that. Some of the changes that we did this year, we created an RTI team. We have a PBIS team that meets twice a month to examine data, school-wide and individually regarding behavior. When we look at those individual children, we also examine their attendance and their academics, and we decided that we needed a response to intervention to examine their data, more particularly as academic Title I students who were at least a year behind. One of the other reasons that we analyzed was that we had a group of students who chose, special ed students who chose not to move schools and remained with us. And that made some of our scores a little difficult. We know that all means all, and we want to support them. So we improved our writing instruction and practice, particularly with 2nd and 3rd grade, so that they would be more prepared for that. We focused on honing our curriculum to essential math standards, and we utilized the Chromebooks very diligently in 3rd through 5th grade, and those teachers also utilized Google Classroom. Our goal number 2, we also examined our Kelvin data to look at facilitating safe and positive school culture. When we examined those Kelvin results by the students on their Chromebooks about their feelings about school, we had the highest overall scores in the district. Our students clearly felt connected with their teachers and staff, and they were motivated by that. We looked at our Swiss data at our PBIS meetings, and we had no suspensions this year. We only had 2 last year. In looking at our Swiss data that talks about our referrals, the lowest area, or the area of most referrals, was on the playground. And so we targeted that. Our RIM Ed grant was going to target our playground area, but due to COVID-19 and thinking that perhaps we'll be in smaller groups and using limited equipment, we decided to revise our RIM Ed grant to focus on COVID-19. Our goal number 3, to engage family and community. Here we examined our ARIES data. We, for the 3rd year in a row, CHE has consistently had the highest monthly attendance. Our families are engaged with our school culture of nurturing the successful student in each child. Students want to be in school, and parents have come to understand the importance of regular attendance for their child's education. And our monthly Saturday school assisted with that. The community wanted to support us, and so we utilized retired adults this year in a volunteer 1st through 3rd grade reading program. We continue to support our community through our efforts with the Running Springs Chamber of Commerce, and we appreciate the support of Snow Valley for our school. Just like every other conversation at this point in time, we circle back to COVID-19. All of the 14 teachers at Charles Hoffman Zoomed with their students weekly. Some didn't start for several weeks due to their level of comfort for being on a screen and for using that technology, but everyone eventually joined in. And as you can see from the photo, the curve is not only about how to use the technology, but how to engage our students once they are on. This is a poor little worn out TK guy.
Aww.
Fortunately, our 3rd through 5th grade classes had used Google Classroom during the school year, and so our students knew how to log on and do their assignment, and those teachers just needed to train the parents how to support their children.
That's cool.
The primary grade teachers all eventually learned how to set up their classrooms through a training that I facilitated with San Bernardino City Unified and other sessions that Heather set up with the county. Those teachers can now do all the steps identified as level 1 out of 3 levels of Google Classroom, and they're practicing this summer so that in August, the CHE will be ready to begin and using the Google Classroom platform. CHE had a kindness focus for a month this winter. In hearing from parents about some of their challenges in the home with students being inside together was creating some family problems and issues. So in response to that, I did a weekly phone call, email, Facebook message where I spoke directly to our students about kindness and how to facilitate family conversations and responses to their parents. And I challenged them to send me photos of kind things that they did or received. If the school is being graded on CASP scores, we missed our chance. We wanted to show you our results. We felt like we worked, made some great changes, facilitated some great conversations with our staff, and we were ready to be a shining star. But you can decide for yourselves. For me, CHE is a fine school. I'd like to conclude with a short little video.
I love this for pictures. So cool.
Oh. Whistle.
Oh, there it is.
There it is. There it is. We just need the sound. There we go.
I love that mascot.
You gotta have the sound though.
I know.
I love Rockland now too, though, I have to say.
The tail looks such a
Yeah, I love it.
I just don't have it.
Aww. Be safe. Be
That's
responsible.
what
Can
they're
I
saying.
say?
That's what they're saying.
Yeah.
We had some students, I asked different families if they would have different students do parts of the chant and take pictures of them.
I love the chant.
Oh,
It's great. The chant reminds us of what our rules are and keeps our focus on, for our students, on how to be successful. So thank you so much.
thank you very much, Mrs. Humphries. I know that you were the only principal that had to give us an update post-pandemic, but we really appreciate that you took the time and effort to do that nonetheless.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll move.
Wait, can I also
Yes,
say that
please.
I really loved your details on your response to your CASP and your, what we're doing and what we're seeing, and this is what we saw in Kelvin and Swiss, and this is our response to it. I mean, it was really great to see the direct correlation. This is what we saw, this is what we did in response. And it was simple. I mean, even, anyone can hear what CHE is doing and to get even better than they are. So thank you so much for doing that. Very clear.
Thank you.
Anything else from our board members on Zoom? We don't want to forget you.
Oh, never mind.
Okay, then we'll go
Nothing
ahead.
from you.
We'll move on to 10.2, current state guidelines, possible reopening plans, and data from staff and family surveys. Superintendent Michelle Murphy and Executive Cabinet.
Okay, so first of all, before we begin, I'd like to say we've been synthesizing information from many entities and meetings. Our meeting workload has probably quadrupled since we have closed schools. For all of us in our positions, with our counterparts, with state officials, I know I weekly have state superintendent calls, county superintendent calls, along with High Desert Mountain superintendent communication, And besides that, all of the optional ones and webinars and information coming to us from the San Bernardino County Department of Health. So I do have a meeting scheduled with them tomorrow, and so even things changed. So things in my presentation changed at 10 o'clock this morning based on an AXA call. So what I'm hoping to do tonight is share with you and synthesize some of that information in about 16 slides. I know that's longer than we typically would like, but I think this is an important opportunity for us to share what we're thinking. Next week, we have some steps planned to talk with our union leaders and with our administration, and then we'll be bringing the reopening plans and suggestions to the board for board discussion on June 25th, so that we can communicate with our community about how we think we're going to open with the guidelines that will be in place and could change in the month of July depending on spikes or lessening of the pandemic. So this slide I'm gonna do is a lot of words. This is not the best way to do a keynote presentation, I know that, but in order to synthesize the data, I had to break kind of the protocols for making a keynote. So looking back on the spring, we did supplemental distance learning that was provided by our district staff for the first 2 weeks. We used the first week for snow days, and then we had spring break. After spring break, our teachers took over the distance learning for the rest of the year. All of that work was supplemental. Grades could only improve from the work they completed from their last report card, and attendance and work were not mandated. So we did notice a drop in student participation as we neared the end of the school year. Google Classroom was the preferred platform, and teachers and administrators had training in May on Google Classroom provided by San Bernardino County Superintendent of Schools. Zoom licenses were purchased for special education and for our administrators, and we heard a lot of fun feedback from some of our teachers that played with Zoom as well. Senior events and graduation planning had to be done, and those plans change sometimes hourly, depending on release of executive orders. And then we had to plan for orientations for our 5th graders and 8th graders, and our accepting schools did that through video orientation. So I hope that everyone's had a chance to log on their 5th grader or 8th grader and watch those videos. And if you haven't, I believe they're still posted on each of those websites at MPH and RHS. So as I said, as I started, there were many weekly meetings for administrators throughout the 2-week time. So one of the things that we wanted to get a jump on was writing a strategic plan for what we knew at the time in May. So we did write a strategic plan, and we released that to our employees so that they would know what we were thinking about and for reopening. We collaborated with all the administration and union leaders. Options for reopening were based on guidelines at that time. That strategic plan is currently being rewritten and will be collaborated with both of those groups next week. So on Monday, June 8th, the CDE finally released the guidelines we were anticipating. It is a 55-page guidebook called Stronger Together, and all of the recommendations are should. So mind you that as you look at those guidelines, they are not mandates. They are should and recommended. And they always refer to follow your county health department guidelines. So I'll be talking about some of the data for the mountain related to COVID on a later slide. So some of the main things I tried to summarize out of that document were that districts have a choice between passive and active screening for staff and students. That means that looking at their wellness when they come onto campus, and to stay home if they have a temperature or any symptoms. To limit outside visitors to campus, to maintain 6 feet apart in classrooms, buses, and hallways. Meal services in classrooms. Again, all of these things are recommended and should do. and minimize staff gatherings such as in places like break rooms, bathrooms, and have virtual training options. Also in the CDE guidelines were cleaning standards for classrooms and buses, avoiding student sharing of technology, books, games, toys, CTE classroom equipment, which is really important to those classes in ROP because those are very hands-on classes and students do share equipment. And things like wood shop and auto shop and health.
Audio visual.
Right. So those are all things where we already share equipment, and it would be very difficult to imagine a classroom setting that's hands-on that you couldn't do that. They did give the instructional model. I won't go over those because Dr. Bramson did that. So they gave some suggestions for scheduling. They want us to make sure that we're teaching hygiene protocols and that PPE, which is the definition for mask and gloves, for students and staff are highly recommended. Other considerations they want us to think about in planning for reopening are ELL students, special education, and CTE classrooms. And they have some checklists available if we want to use them as we guide our decisions. So, and some of those include campus access, hygiene, PPE, and cleaning routines. I'm running 2 screens at the same time, so if you're wondering what I'm doing, I'm giving that for the other 2. So, then the CDH, that's the California Department of Health, came out with their guidance for schools. So it's very similar, but yet has some different things. So again, they're referring to our County Department of Health and to plan for possible closure. Promote healthy hygiene practices, encourage coughing correctly, face coverings when physical distancing is not practical. Intensify cleaning, disinfection, and ventilation. They asked for a lot of our windows to be open, which is possible, but not in the winter here. It's too cold. So, but I think as much as possible, we have an opportunity to open our windows. Maximize space, limit visitors, learn outside as much as possible. Meals in classrooms, recess areas designated by classroom. They also recommend limit sharing student belonging and avoid sharing supplies. Labeling student belonging, I'm sorry about that. Train all staff and educate family on sanitation practices, physical distancing, screening, face coverings, and COVID-19. Just so you know, we're already working on a PowerPoint to share for the first day students come back at all campuses. Plan for when a staff member, child, or visitor becomes sick. Make sure that every school site has an isolation room for anyone with symptoms, and then they are to a mask immediately if they're showing any symptoms of COVID-19 or have a temperature. Disinfect their area and home isolation if cases confirmed. Maintaining healthy operations, monitoring illness, and designate a staff liaison to work with the community and the county. Considerations for partial or total closures will be based on state and local orders and orders from the County Department of Health. Just so that everyone is very aware when a case is confirmed to have happened at a school site or with an employee that would have any contact with other employees or students, the superintendent will be contacted by the San Bernardino County Department of Health. I have not been contacted one time during this outbreak because we were closed before anyone that we knew had COVID. So, and they're recommending that 14-day isolation period and temporary closures are possible. So what's already in place at Rim of the World? We've been working really hard to get ready for whatever comes our way, and including having students back on campus. So we've done quite a lot of work. I cannot take the credit for that. I'd like to thank my cabinet and our Director of Maintenance and Operations and Transportation and Special Education, who have all done a great job of helping with these things. So stickers have already been ordered, and sites are establishing hallway traffic patterns for all school sites. So those stickers have not arrived yet, but when they do, our principals have already talked about how they're going to establish some traffic patterns in their hallways. Plexiglass barriers are being installed this summer at campus entry points for security and secretary desk. We have posters for symptom reminders and hygiene protocols. We're also looking at banners near front doorways for symptoms when students arrive to school, reminding them to check on their symptoms. We've had training for custodians, and cleaning crews are established for summer sanitation and disinfection. So those cleaning crews will start next week. We have improved cleaning measures for classrooms for when students are allowed back on campuses and buses daily. Masks have been ordered in case they are mandated for all students and staff, and face shields have also been ordered if that would be the preference for our teachers or any other staff. Hand sanitizer has been ordered for all sites and for each and every classroom, library, and various other locations. Continuing on with what we've done, we have multiple touchless thermometers for school sites and the district nurse. We have isolation rooms identified at each of our school sites. All Chromebooks will be barcoded this summer for distribution if needed. We are moving away from our Outlook for email and calendar for employees, and will merge to Google for integration with Google Classroom to make it easier for our teachers for the next school year. As I stated earlier, we had already written a first draft of a strategic plan. Draft 2 is in progress and will be collaborated on next week. Parent notification regarding COVID-19 procedures will be part of ARIES confirmation for the 2021 school year. Mr. Beal has created an employee guidance handbook for COVID-19, and employees will have target solutions training on COVID-19 and social emotional well-being, stress-related training. The welcome back for our next school year will take place at school sites and not at the high school. We do not anticipate that they will allow crowds over 250, though they are lessening the crowd numbers or increasing them as they go through the stages. We still do not anticipate being able to have crowds over 250. So we are preparing for that in a fun and special way. So, and staff will be notified tomorrow if they're not watching today. So those are all the things that we've currently done in anticipation of opening. Okay. So what I've done is we had surveys go out to our classified staff, our certificated staff, and our parents. Our parents took 2 surveys. One about technology use and one about our access, and the other about reopening. And so I have taken all of those data points that were where the questions were the same and averaged them into one graph. So the data you're seeing here is the preferences for 3 plans for August, and then on the column over here are the individual percentage points and how many responded. CT stands for certificated teachers, CL stands for classified staff, and P equals parents. So as you can see, we had 126 teachers take the survey. We had 103 classified staff. We had 1,191 parents take, which is tremendous results. A typical survey, if you get 5% of your population to answer a survey, that's considered on the move. So as you can see, we had over 30% of our parents answered our survey. So what do they want? 55% of all those combined scores, the board has a copy of the individual group scores, want to return back to campus with safety measures in place. 23% would like to do the blended learning model, which is the 2 to 3 days a week at school and 2 to 3 days a week in distance learning. And 23%, it's about the same, want full-time distance learning. And then you can see on the side the individual scores by each group of people. So if we combined the support, we asked our, we did not ask this question of our parents, but we asked this question of our classified and certificated staff, what would you support if that we had to enforce the following measures that we had been hearing about? So mandating masks for all, you can see that, those were the responses, and I did the average over here. So 29% of our staff would agree with that measure. Temperature and wellness checks were higher at about 40%. I'm sorry, I can't read the numbers with my glasses. And 46. 56. Children eating in classrooms, that doesn't seem to be wanted by anyone. Along with limiting recess and PE. And I think, we do follow social media, and our families are really concerned with that. Many families don't want their children in masks, do not want their children eating in the classroom. Those are some of the buy-ins for some of our kids for fun. And they want them to be on the equipment and play at recess. Physical distancing when possible, and that is at a higher at 7%? 49, I'm so sorry, I couldn't get those numbers bigger, and I really tried. For our parents, we did ask them about what are their preferences for masks. 50% said they'll follow whatever current CDC guidelines are. 35% said my child will not wear a mask. Some of those parents have said they won't return to school if we require it. And then 14% want their child to wear a mask no matter what the CDC says.
The CDC or the CDE?
It was CDC on the questions.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
that might be a typo in the.
That's a typo, it's CDC.
Thank you.
So none of us caught it, so there we go. So some additional data, we asked parents for their thoughts about busing. 9% will not ride the bus that did this year. 25% will ride without physical distancing. 22% will not ride the bus unless there is physical distancing. So, and then about 49% answered they don't take the bus. So, 574 parents responded to the technology survey, and only 5% did not have internet access at home of the ones that answered the survey, and 80% of students have access to a device that has Wi-Fi capability. So I think those numbers are a little smaller than we anticipated.
Can I chime in on that? I think that the lower number of parents who responded to it may have affected that, but also you're responding to a technology survey on technology.
Right.
So you have internet access if you're filling out the survey.
Well,
They
that's
were
not-
all given paper copies at the food distribution.
Yeah.
And those are people who are getting food, so it's
Right.
not a perfect sample.
In other words, if we were to guess a little bit higher and pad.
Oh, definitely padding,
Yeah.
I would guess
Right.
higher, yeah.
But it's still a really good number for
Yeah.
those that answered the survey. And how many were paper were turned in?
About 70.
Oh, that's
70.
a good turn-in too.
Yeah.
Good.
So, we did some research about COVID-19 on the mountain, and we did that through the San Bernardino County Department of Health website. There are currently 19 cases and 2 deaths from Cedar Pines Park to Green Valley Lake across the district. While San Bernardino has had 6,417 confirmed cases, these numbers were as of yesterday, 221 deaths, and 3,767 have recovered. This equates to 0.003 of the cases in the county in our district boundaries and 0.009% of deaths in the county. While heartbreaking and tragic for our families, the cases on our mountain are statistically insignificant compared to the county as a whole. Under 10% of all the cases in San Bernardino County are under the age of 19. More statistics can be viewed on the San Bernardino Department of Health website. And just so that you know on this fact, we are finding that we are very similar to the high desert. The high desert and the mountain school districts have very similar statistics, while the big districts on the front side of the mountain, which would be like Yucaipa, Redlands, Fontana, Colton, Rialto, their statistics are much greater because of their population density. So that is one of the things that we are going to be talking about in our meeting tomorrow with superintendents of the San Bernardino County Department of Health, And the High Desert Mount superintendents have released a letter to government officials this afternoon, and I was one of the 13 superintendents that signed that, about asking for some flexibility because our statistics are so low when we consider reopening. So now I'd like to talk about what we're considering for reopening. And so we've prepared in our strategic plan 3 options, and these were surveyed as well, as you saw in the data before. So with 100% of staff and students return with safety measures, all students and staff would return to campus with options. So K-6 would have the option of home choice, and 7-12 would have an option of independent study for families that don't want their children to return to campus. That program already exists for 7-12, and the K-6 option was, we were already planning and had been planning for several years with our union, and we have hired a coordinator, Mr. Dave Nygren, and we hired him in, I want to say March, to start the home choice program. We had about 170 families express interest. The applications are due tomorrow, which we will reopen in July, but we've only had 30 families turn in those applications. So in looking at what we would do for increased safety measures, classrooms would have desks facing forward with as much space as possible in between. And again, that would be dependent on the size of the classroom. The teacher's desk would need to be 6 feet from the students when possible. We have asked our teachers to take home any personal furniture out of their classroom, leaving just things that could fit on the counter. So a lot of our teachers have done, fun things with couches and flexible seating, but we've asked them to take that home to allow as much space in the classroom as possible, and they have done so. Hygiene and symptom protocols will be taught, and reminders on displays with posters and banners. Student supplies will be labeled, and masks will be up to individual preference. Cleaning routines followed by custodians, and windows open when possible for increased ventilation. Again, hallway traffic patterns will be on displays on floors, and we will be recommending that students wear masks during passing period. Buses, physical distancing is not possible. Jen let us know, that is our Director of Transportation, that if we were to space kids 6 feet apart, we could fit 10 students. Was that correct? It was 9 or 10 students per bus. If we were mandated to do that, we would have to change our bus transportation to satellites only. And what does that mean? That we could not have a bunch of stops throughout the mountain, perhaps one stop in each city, which parents would bring to that stop, like in Cedar Pines Park or Crestline or Twin Peaks. Just giving examples, they'd have to bring them to that stop, and there'd be multiple buses rotating through, bringing the kids in. Otherwise, it would be impossible for us to do. So masks would be the one area that on the buses would be mandatory if we were to fill them like we currently do. Recesses could be staggered, and lunch spacing would still be possible if we just changed our table configuration a little bit. We do have plexiglass at entry points. We are providing masks for every student and every employee in case they would like to wear them. Every site has established isolation rooms, and wellness checks will be in place, and we'll use passive wellness checks, along with a signature from an acknowledgement of those practices by our parents. And our employees, our classified employees, already have our COVID-19 handbook, and we will be sharing that with teachers when they return.
How would, since we have contactless thermometers, how would that work in terms of a passive wellness check?
It would be students that are feeling sick or things come to the front office that we would take their temperature.
Okay.
And teachers could also do a visual check of their class, and if they notice someone that doesn't look well, could send them up. We would just have multiple in different locations. So 100% distance learning will look very different than it did during supplemental distance learning that took place this spring. So attendance would be taken daily for staff and students. Yes? Jordana, can you re-ask your question? The speaker had turned off because it had been on too long. Jordana, can you re-ask your question, please? The speaker was turned off.
Absolutely. With our existing staffing, is it feasible for us to do option one?
Yes.
Okay.
I didn't understand her question.
With existing staff, can we do option one?
Well, option one
Return
is
to school.
essentially returning to school. The way it
Option one
was
is
before.
essentially returning to school.
With all the different, like being able to do all the, like the wellness, being able to do the taking the temperatures and all the cleaning that'll be required.
That would be a
and,
passive
just the
wellness.
different,
That would be a passive wellness check, so we're relying on parents and employees
Okay.
to let us know or to stay home if they're sick. We will not have lines of
We're not.
900 students taking their temperature before they enter the high school.
We're not China.
Right.
I sent her this
So-
video. It was crazy.
With distance learning, teachers would be working from their school sites and establishing online learning, teaching, small group instruction, parent contact schedule, assignments would be graded, and assessments would be given. Google Classroom will be utilized by all students and staff, and Zoom will still be an option. Several teachers reached out to me and were really like the features of Zoom for instructional purposes, and so they were really concerned that if they were using Google Classroom to have student work uploaded and graded, could they still use Zoom? And my answer was yes. So, because they really like the features versus Google Hangouts or Google Meets. Grade level subject area district-wide collaboration for key California standards, because we're gonna have to focus on the key, what we used to call in the good old days when I was in the classroom, power standards. So looking at those key standards by subject and by grade of what's most important to be taught. And site devices would then be checked out to students without devices at home. Parents would be responsible for repairs and Wi-Fi via an acceptable use policy to be signed by parents. Devices would be returned when students return to campus. We do not have enough devices to give every student a device, but if our survey is any indication, even though there wasn't the technology question was also answered in the survey of 1,000. So giving the students that did not have any devices at home priority on our own devices.
And just to reiterate, I know we talked about it during the last board meeting, but we requested 3,000 Chromebooks from the California Department of Education in an initiative with the governor. They were looking to bridge the technology gap in districts, and they were asking districts, how much do you need? And we asked for 3,000 and they gave us 10, is that correct?
That's correct.
So it would make sense to prioritize the students of most need, given what we were given from the state.
We can almost do it. We're about 600 devices short for being able to give every student a device. If we had to do blended learning, as you can see, this was the one of the least favorable options from staff and from parents. But we did have teachers choose which kind of track system they liked the best. And so the teacher data indicated by 70% that they liked the model of students attending, one track would be Monday, Wednesday, and then every other Friday. The other track would be Tuesday, Thursday, and every other Friday. This was their preference by 70%. It would be a priority to keep our families together and on the same track when families at multiple sites would be on the same track, keeping families together. So we really want, that's really a key component for us. There might have to be some shifting from one track to another to balance the numbers. And we would ask families, you know, that if one's track ended up being greater than another, but initially separated A through M and through Z, and then we would balance those and asking families to shift but keeping them together. Days when students are not in school, they would check in virtually every morning. We got this idea from a teacher in the classroom so that no matter what, if they were at home or in class, they would do their morning routine or morning check-in all together so that the teacher could take attendance in Aries. And then they would do this every morning in K through 5, and 7 through 12 would be a block schedule that sites would create for distance learning. Google Classroom again would be utilized by all students, and Zoom would be an option. Work and assessments completed at home will be graded, and attendance will be taken daily for both staff and students. Classrooms and buses will be set up for 50% capacity, and all other safety measures outlined in the presentation will remain the same. So all the things we've already done and the other safety measures.
For grading and attendance, that will apply to any scenario, is that correct? Or just blended learning?
For 100% as well. Grading and attendance will be taken every day.
What about virtual learning?
Yes.
Okay, so all of them.
Yeah, all of them. One of the things that the guidelines have predicted that we would have to be ready for is future school closure. So a spike in COVID-19, a case at a school site in RIM. And there's very specific guidelines about what must be cleaned, what must be done if we have a confirmed case at a school site, and that we must have this fluidity between 100% being on campus and distance learning for 14 days while that isolation period takes place, and then back to school. So we have talked about that extensively, and so but again, those would be done by executive orders for school closure or based on county health and COVID cases on the mountain. Teaching and learning could be on campus one day and virtually taking place within 24 to 48 hours for short-term or extended closure. Learning and work will not be supplemental and will be graded. Teachers will schedule teaching times outlined on the slide for distance learning. The plan will have to include offering distance learning, keeping track of students, aligning content with standards, and not just enrichment activities, and that comes right out of the guidelines. And I know I've been talking.
Nope.
So what are our next steps? So our next steps are to continue and have board discussion and resolution out to our families on June 26th, so we would do that at the June 25th board meeting. We will continue staff meetings at the county, state, and district level as required with cabinets and collaborations with our union. Mr. Beal has already scheduled those, and we'll be working with them for several hours on Tuesday, and with our administrative team, that means all administrators in the district, on Monday. We will monitor the ever-changing guidelines and executive orders that will influence and change RIM reopening plans. Employee and family notification, if anything changes, would be mid-July, after we notify them on the 26th. Completion of distance learning, I need to complete the distance learning professional learning network with AXA, and following statewide recommendations that we'll be giving out. So those are kind of the next steps, and I know I talked really fast and I read a lot, and that's not my normal presentation style, but we're really trying to synthesize a lot of information and what we're thinking. If it were to be up to me to give a recommendation, I would recommend that we move forward with plans to open with all students being back on campus, following the safety protocols, and for families that did not feel comfortable with that they go ahead and complete the application for home choice and for independent study. so that we have options for our kids. So,
Question time?
sure.
You had mentioned, you had mentioned that if we do open up with 100% return, students return to campus, I just lost my thought. But you had mentioned that we have contingencies in place should we need to switch at a moment's notice to distance learning, correct?
Well, we are currently, our library media techs this summer are putting barcodes on our Chromebooks. Our teachers have attended Google training, and we will look to our school sites to pass out that equipment should we need to. That's why I put on the slide previously that it might take 24 to 48 hours for us to get our equipment out. So the biggest hurdle for the equipment after it's barcoded is their charging cables are in cases or in cows, what we call them, carts, and to get access to those cables takes quite a bit of work, and we have 2 people in our technology department. So that will take some help with school sites.
Yes.
So they need to be removed from the cows to be able to go home with the families.
And we've got to get the charging cable. We did get a quote for charging cables extra so that we would not have to do that, but it was over $100,000. That's why we're really hoping that the state comes through with their promises to give us Chromebooks.
And that's also in our advocacy letter, by the way, about Chromebooks. And I remember what I was going to ask. So if we do a return to 100% on campus model, and families, and we go forward with that and we announce it June 26th, would we, you mentioned that there's a possibility we could reopen the home choice program applications?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that was my question.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll reopen those in July. Probably, we've discussed the first 2 weeks of July reopening those applications because we would still need to plan for those students. We would have to work with our teachers and our union for those positions to be filled, and we have to look at the data from what school sites they're coming from so that we know how to shift numbers of physical kids on campus. And so later than that would be very difficult for us to start school with any accuracy.
That makes sense. So really, the home choice program will be an option in any scenario.
Yes.
If should a family feel uncomfortable with any guidelines that we're setting in place,
Yes,
whether it's not enough guidelines or too many guidelines.
correct.
Okay.
And for clarification, that's something that our district's been offering anyways. There are homeschool options through the district. I know at the elementary school, we have one teacher in particular that has a few students who is doing that.
It's a home hospital on that one.
Okay.
A little different, but.
So this is the first time we have an offering for elementary.
Gotcha.
So, but we were planning on opening that prior to COVID-19.
Right.
We've been working on that for several years. This was just our launch was 2021 August, and so it was timely.
It was timely, and I think the original intent of it wasn't anything to do with the pandemic. It was hopefully a way to entice more families back to the school district in ways of offering home choice programs. Many families, for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable sending their kids to public school, but if they had the choice for homeschooling through our district, it had a lot of advantages. So that was the original purpose, but it's fortuitous that this is in place now that we have been in this pandemic for families that already send their kids to school here.
And as you said, it's an option, and that's what I was really wanting for families, to recognize that each family has their own reasons for being in school or not being in school, and if what the district decides to do isn't in line with what works best for them, then we do have another option for them.
And our data supports reopening our schools.
In regards, I know we're looking at very big picture stuff now. Before we do a board resolution, are we going to be getting the information about what athletics might look like, what maybe assemblies might look like, what
It's
those
my
two.
understanding that we don't have to actually do a board resolution, just but give board direction.
Okay.
Athletics, we are still waiting for direction from CIF and that committee that Cindy talked about. We've heard many rumors about athletics. Our football coach, Joe Gerardo, did an excellent job of presenting Ms. Burke and Mr. Beal with an outline to start practices. We've heard rumors that they may switch those contact sports to the spring and bring in the less contact sports that take place in the spring, moving those to fall. We've heard Tony Thurman say in superintendent meetings that he doesn't think sports are possible. But we've heard very loud and clear from our parents and our students that they want sports, so we're currently following the guidelines from
National Federation of High School Sports.
National Federation of High School Sports. I don't know if they could hear you with your
Yeah,
mask on. So, and Mr. Gerardo has done those explicitly to those guidelines. I know 2 other school districts in the desert that are allowing the same procedures to take place so that practices that normally take place in the summer can start. That would be Hesperia Unified, for sure, and I have their athletic guidelines, so,
So-
we're all working together to do what's best for kids.
Right, so to try to break that down a little bit more, I know that we're kind of waiting for CIF, but I heard you say other schools have implemented practices already as long as they're following the national guidelines. When would we make that, would it be our decision, when would we make that decision, would it be yours?
Cabinet
Would it-
is reviewing those, plans submitted by the coaches that have already submitted them. To my knowledge, there's only been 1 coach that submitted plans.
We have actually plans for most other sports, we got
Okay.
from Mr. Riseborough. But we will be, meeting with the high school administration next week, I don't know what day, to look kind of finalizing those plans and seeing what we can do to make it actually happen.
Okay.
Right now, our priority is, football, 'cause that's
Summer practicing.
exactly,
Yeah.
because they have to have so many days of actual practices before they can even begin games. For those athletes. But like Michelle said, Coach Gerardo did a really good job putting a plan together, and that's something we could actually implement. Just a matter of booking the days and then they can actually get started.
Okay.
Cause right now the guidelines are still no gatherings less than 10, not sharing equipment, but his plan included ways to work.
Avoid that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I would just say, in regards to formulating these reopening plans, I know that it's a rarity for school districts in the state to have put out reopening plans already, and that's because the state guidelines were just released on Monday. And I appreciate that we're taking our time to wait and see what those guidelines are before implementing a reopening guidelines plan. I think it would be too rushed to put out our own plan regardless of what the guidelines were, and then have to go back and revise them or throw them out altogether. So I appreciate that you've been following the state, or waiting until we hear from the state what's going to be possible, what's going to be feasible before moving forward. So I think
My counterparts in the Mountain High Desert Superintendent Group do want to, most of those districts want to wait until mid-July to release their plans to their community. However, I've heard from quite a few parents and monitoring social media that they would rather know sooner than later what we're thinking. So our plan is to talk about it at the next board meeting and release the revised strategic plan that was just written for staff is being rewritten for students and staff. And so that will be released the day after that board meeting, should you like my recommendations.
I know in one delegate assembly meeting, breakout session, that there are a couple of school districts in Northern California who have, like us, very, very low cases, if none, and they've already determined that they're going to, even before the guidelines were released, are like, we're going back to school 100% brick and mortar, because we have no cases or very minimal cases of COVID-19, and so, but again, they are also implementing safety measures to make staff and students and parents feel comfortable that they're being taken care of. I think that, you know, when we were talking about the bus situation, there's some school districts that confirm the same thing, like basically 10 kids on a bus would be what the norm would be. So how do you make that work for your district? And so there's conversations about doing satellite busing, doing, you know, social distancing, that, and supplementing the buses. And then there's others that are just like, well, we can't, we can't do busing at all this coming year, just can't. I mean, I'm hoping that the legislators decide to continue to the goal of the hold harmless ADA, so that we can not be penalized further for enrollment and attendance issues.
The other thing that superintendents are really advocating for is there is no proposal currently that includes a change in instructional minute requirements.
Right.
So 100% distance learning would not meet those instructional
Right.
minutes requirements. So our options to still follow what is current ed code would have to be something of the blended learning model, or the 100% back on campus, or we would not be in compliance.
And that's what we were talking in San Dubs just this week, and getting the report from Capital Advisors, is that the legislators understand that modifications and changes would have to be made for instructional minutes, for attendance, for all of these components, and that our reopening plans are not going to be in compliance if they don't do something about it. And so that, again, is part of the whole frustration with, although we appreciate the recommendations that came from Tony Thurman, there's just so much work to be done at the state level in order for us to follow the recommendations. And so it's a little bit frustrating and it's also frustrating to hear that, oh, okay, everybody's gonna go to summer recess, and you're like, what? I hope you get this all done by the time you guys leave for a summer vacation. Because we open August 12th. Is this gonna be in place, or are we going to be out of compliance? And so it's just super frustrating to listen to this, and I understand it's unprecedented, but according to Capital Advisors in our report from the state, all the bills that were currently on the floor, a lot of them done. It is now just essential business, just essential bills. So, hello, get on it and let's make some decisions happen.
Well, yeah, Cindy, I think you're right. I read those 55 pages,
Yeah,
and it's so frustrating because it's just impractical, and
it's not feasible, it's not
feasible.
financially sound. And how are we supposed to do this?
Right. Well, and for me, the frustration is why create guidelines that are, again, impractical for any district
We're out
to
of
follow.
compliance.
How does anybody how do you teach with 5 kids in a room? I mean, that's all that can fit if you're all 6 feet apart. We can't even be 6 feet apart in here, and there's very few of us in this room. So, things that are just so impractical are frustrating. And as you talk about attendance, you know, we don't want anybody to come to school that's remotely
Exactly.
sick or thinking of being sick, yet we're gonna be punished for that funding
Exactly.
wise. It's just
Exactly.
madness.
They need to continue that hold harmless.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for putting in all of that work, and the rest of your team. We
I
appreciate
apologize,
it.
that was really
No,
long.
we
I think it
we
was
need
very
all
well
of
needed.
it. We need it. Thank you.
Yes.
I also want to commend our union leaders and our principals and the district office staff that literally came in and wrote on the piece of paper that you had up here with all the scenarios. I know that it's time taken out to come here and do that work, and so I have to say thank you to everybody who came in here and wrote on the pieces of paper so that it could be compiled. It was very nice.
And they're willing to come in again next week as we
Yes.
prepare draft 2.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it was important that it wasn't done in a vacuum. It was done with union involvement. It was done with our
Sensitivity.
principals. We put out surveys to our parents, our teachers, and other staff members. So I appreciate that we've taken that time again to hopefully, I view it as taking the prudent route of let's collect all of the feedback, all of the information before we start going and creating our own plans that may not be valid. So I think it's been wise of you to take this approach.
Thank you.
And if I could add also, I love how you did collect all that data and are acting on the data that you collected.
Mhm.
I do have questions confirming that for 7th through grades 7 through 12, we already have an online learning available to those students to be able to allow them to do distance learning. So we have K through 12 covered with between school choice and online learning, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, fantastic. And then just wondering, especially since of course we've been collaborating with the CSEA, is if we did have to go to distance learning, has there been a plan devised at this point as to how we would best put to use our support staff who otherwise would be taking care of things on campus?
If I could address that real quick,
Yes.
and I know Derek's been helping out with this as well. We
You have
reached
to
out,
talk louder.
yeah, sorry, we reached out to SELPA, to how we can utilize our instructional aides, EL, special ed, Title I aides, and how they can support our teachers through distance learning. And so we have a training coming up, prior to school's opening, and so if we do have to go to the distance learning model for whatever case, hopefully we can have them trained appropriately so they're ready to, help our students in need.
That's a really,
Fantastic.
oh, go ahead, Dana.
And I should have added that to things that we're doing on the slide there.
That's okay. I'm just incredibly impressed. I guess it was wordy, but it had to be wordy. And the amount of time and effort and thought into providing different possibilities, seeking community and staff input has been just really superlative. And I appreciate that there wasn't any kind of knee-jerk reaction with the shutdown and everything that has happened since, and the thoughtfulness in how planning and implementation and dealing with the situations happened has been highly impressive. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much, Michelle. We'll move forward to 10.3, Finance/Facilities, Budget Report. Jenny Haberlin, Chief Business Official.
She's like, okay, here we go. Buckle up. Buckle up.
It's only 2 minutes long.
Okay, sure, it's only 2 minutes long. I did try to shorten it though, so.
Buckle up, bonsai.
Thank you very much. I wanted to, just before, and this isn't in my notes, and I don't have a slide for it. I just wanted to, because you mentioned a couple times the hold harmless, and I wanted to just touch base, and it might circle around to some of the information in here. I just wanted to mention that as a district, we're already, because we're declining enrollment, paid on the prior year guarantee. So we're paid on the greater of the current or the prior year, which is considered a hold harmless. My worry would be if they don't hold some type of harmless for us, next year's attendance is the following year's revenue.
Right.
What it's based on. So for declining enrollment districts, will they, we're already paid on the prior year guarantee, and how will they tweak that formula
Right.
to not, to hurt us even more? So, I mean, we're kind of looking.
I think that's the whole point, is to
Yeah.
keep your ADA as it was at the time, as March,
And
that,
for how many years?
and for
Right.
how many years.
Yeah.
But at least through next year, so that the following year, you're still basing it on March of 2020.
Until you have that normal base year.
Right.
That you can say, okay, this is the year that
Yes.
we're going to go back to. So it'll be, I'm glad their advocacy groups are thinking
Yes.
about it, because that's been on my mind, so.
Either that, funding based off of ADA
Or
for,
enrollment.
exactly,
Hello.
that's exactly what I was going to, or funding based on the amount of students enrolled in the district, regardless of what days they show up to school.
The
because.
thing is that based on what we got from Capital Advisors this week, is that the enrollment, which would be awesome, and I know that, like Mr. Bear would love if we would base it on enrollment other than ADA and change the formula, but that's probably not gonna happen. The more likely would be the hold harmless ADA.
Or there
Yeah.
is a thought that, you can base it on enrollment, but just apply the state average ADA. You would have some winners and losers in that scenario too, but it
Right.
would, if they're looking for something to base it on rather than enrollment, there's some, hopefully they're asking people in the field.
Yes.
Who are really close to that. So, okay, so, we have the proposed budget. There's a budget hearing on a couple agenda items after mine. And, what that, we've had the, advertisements in the paper, where you can look, to inspect the proposed budget. And, included in that is anyone could have reached out to my assistant or myself to get a copy or scan because of the closures. Although since the inspection date requirements, our office has been open and the budget's been on the counter up front and available online, although we didn't get anyone asking for it. So I wanted to just go through a couple kind of just housekeeping things with the budget. We will be looking towards having 3 different types of budget approval. Of course, we want our budget approved. We don't, worst case scenario, if it's conditionally approved, that there's not so many consequences for us. And then, of course, a disapproved budget comes with a lot of work behind it, and that is very emotional and traumatic for a district. We've gone through that before. So we are right now going to be turning in a budget to you on June 25th for adoption, that we're going to assume that it's an approved budget for based on a fiscal solvency plan that will accompany it on the 25th. Okay. Budget approval is per ed code, and they didn't relax any of the ed code or timelines for a budget approval with the COVID-19 pandemic. And then the consequences to not having the budget completed and approved would be they could stop the issuance of commercial and salary warrants, and they would hold our apportionment at the county level. So it makes it very important that we don't miss our deadlines and that we turn in a thoughtful and complete document. Okay? Per Assembly Bill 1200, we call it AB 1200, there's a lot of guidance that Assembly Bill covers, but that is what requires county oversight, and that is also what it requires us to produce multi-year projections, which are, we project revenue out 3 years and expenditures. Our county office, because we're a declining enrollment, I need to look at a 5-year budget scenario, and that is just for them to more, as their oversight, Rim, what are you doing to address this? And we've talked about the multi-year projections a lot, so I won't get into that. Okay, this year we normally would be having a public hearing on the LCAP and on the budget. And then our LCAP would be adopted along with the budget, and one would be dependent on the other for approval at the county office. This year, a written report is the only item that's required to be submitted along with the budget, and they're anticipating that the LCAP would then be adopted at first interim, which is December of 2020, and then we'll I don't know how that would look like with aligning a budget to a document for a budget that's already been approved, but
6 months later.
yeah.
Yes.
So, but we will.
That just works my nerve, I'm just gonna tell you right now.
I know it does. So
Just saying.
Okay, so that is a little bit different this year because of the COVID-19, but you can expect that at next board meeting as well. Okay, how we build the budget. We take our revenues, largely it's a function of our enrollment, which gives us our attendance. and then we apply that to the, per ADA amounts that the state provides us. We look at our expenditures, our operational, our contractual obligations, our STRS, PERS, health and welfare, utilities, and then we allocate site funds, based on, just different formulas. And then we come up with what our ending fund balance is. And that is, there's also an agenda item, in your packet today that we talked about specifically, and I gave you some backup of the components of the fund balance. Okay. And in doing that, as part of, touching on the revenue side, we also work with our partners in SELPA for federal grants like Title I, and a lot of that we are given those numbers. It's something that we have to necessarily calculate ourselves. We are told this is your projected Title I, these are your projected revenue streams and expenses that will be charged, received and charged by the SELPA. And so a lot of that we just, we're told what lottery rates are, we multiply that by our ADA and our mandated block grants. Okay, new this year in the budget, and I wanted to also let you know, you have a copy of the proposed budget that you can take home with you, and you can look at it, because you're not adopting this, you're not voting on this today. You're voting on that on June 25th. So, and there could be some changes depending on what happens Monday. The Senate and the Assembly are voting on their budget package, and they're currently negotiating with our governor on how to fund education. So I talked to the county office today, and this particular budget was built on current assumptions from the May revise, which may be drastically different Monday. So will they have us, there's a lot of system technical input work, will they have us go in and change everything and produce to you a more accurate budget on the 25th? Or will they say leave it as is, fix it in September, and we know we're just going to, we know this isn't going to be what the state approved. So the county hasn't decided, they're just waiting to see what the discrepancy would be compared to what our guidance today and our guidance on Monday. If our guidance, I mean, if there's a huge discrepancy, I don't think any of us would not want to go back in, because it's so devastatingly tragic on how the state has funded us with this current budget. We would want, you have to work 24/7 to get those numbers adjusted if we knew we were going to get more money. So, because we want it to be a thoughtful document. Yes.
And you had just clarified, just to clarify, this is based on the May revise, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So new this year though is the federal stimulus funds, and this is just the dollar amounts known as of today. So Michelle has touched on how many times that we get changes. And to be honest, from print of this document to today, there's even another change that we're not even going to talk about today, because we think that there's going to be even another change. So, but as of printing this document, it looks like from the CARES Act, we would be receiving just over $2 million. Now, 1.4 of that, we're being told we could offset direct state cuts from. The governor, in a press conference last week, was adamant that he didn't want that to happen, and that he wanted the allocation to be done in a different way that would not benefit our district. Our county office says there's enough people fighting for the governor not to get his way on that, to go ahead right now and put it in your budget. Although you have to know that depending on the negotiations with the governor, there is $1.4 million of federal relief to offset state cuts. That is an unknown. So $763,000 is pretty solid. It's because it was part of the first round of the CARES Act. Although when we get to the item where we talk about our reserves, I did hold that in our reserves and not offset state cuts, because we already have the account number of which this dollar amount right now is coming in on the unrestricted side and will be moved to the restricted side. And what are those restrictions? We don't know.
Right.
So we can't really count that it can be used for anything we want, so that to be prudent, we would restrict that right now, knowing, I mean, even the account code number isn't a restricted account code, and we don't have what the restrictions are, but we just know it's gonna be on the restricted side of the budget. So why keep it on the unrestricted side if we know that now?
And I know that the Senate really opposed that whole
Yes.
thing of the concentration,
Yes.
so we're gonna see how that fight progress. That's why I wanna be the fly on the wall for that.
I would love to be a fly on the wall.
God.
So, okay, just a little refresher, especially if people, who don't normally come to board meetings are listening in. When we talked about LCFF and ADA, LCFF is an allocation method on how we receive our funding. It's a per ADA dollar amount that then is applied, and then adjusted for grade spans and for, our supplemental and concentration students. I don't wanna go too far, discussion on the definition of LCFF, but just in addition to the per ADA amount, each year a COLA is applied. And just to, touch on, the COLA that is applied doesn't cover increases such as STRS, PERS, and health insurance. So really, it's, when the state says that they are fully funding LCFF, I think we wanna stress that the full funding LCFF is in no way adequate funding for K-12 public schools. There's definitely a misnomer at the state level that districts like ours don't need the same amount of funding per student as neighboring districts, and the base amounts of funding under LCFF need to be increased. So, touching on the advocacy letters that you're working on, that is another area I think we've talked a lot at board meetings on the unfairness, kind of, the winners and losers in the districts. And the senator from Riverside spoke to Casvo, and they taped it for all of us to watch, and really talked about you can have a very poor school in a district that itself, in the district itself is not a concentration district that has a lot of schools in need, but maybe one or two schools in need, and that, across the street, another district, two schools with very similar demographics, and one's being, funded at $2,000-3,000 less per student than another, and it sounds like they're trying to get that message to the governor on some of these shortfalls and how the funds are allocated. Okay, I wanted to talk about, and as we go through this document, we normally have a lot of historical trends, projected ADA, where we were, where we think we might be, and right now, we're not really going to go into a lot of that. I mean, we have to go into some of it, but with COVID-19, where we're at now, what will our enrollment be? Will we have an increase in enrollment? Will we have a decrease in enrollment? Will the economic turns, will families move? Will, you have families doubled up and move to another state? So there's a lot of unknowns, and so to really trust just historical trends that have really been spot on for RIM, is really, I don't know how much we want to count on that right now because of not knowing what will happen. But you can see that we are projecting a very small decrease in enrollment next year, and there's another slide on the why. It's not necessarily getting away from our 3% trend, but we have a small senior class graduating, and that's the smallest class we have. So just by just on the natural, we have if kindergarten classes stay the same, our enrollment's going to look like it's grown because of a larger group of kids coming in and a small senior class leaving. Okay, and this is where I wanted to get at. This is our current month 7 enrollment. It's also our final month because of the school closure. And you can see that when we look, and Todd and I work together with the principals on this, we kind of ad nauseum go through it. And you can see that we use this but by school on what 5th graders are moving into 6th graders, so what can MPH expect? What 12th graders are leaving? What kinders are going into first? And you can see that the current 12th graders are 177 students. If our kinders stay the same, you know, we're losing a class of 177, and then we're adding possibly another class of 231. We have applied a 3% decline when we've met for staffing ratios, but it just looks like about a 1% because of that change. And it is one thing that the county was a little critical on, because I share data before I even have to turn it into them, because I like, check this for me. I have a very good relationship with them, and they're like, well, your projection isn't staying on trend. And this is the kind of stuff we can explain to them, and this is the why. I think we're small enough that we can drill down on this data a little bit easier than a big district can, because we have 6 schools, and we can do this in an hour and not necessarily have it be a big project and need a full staff.
So, if I see here from the last slide, our CBEDS date of 3,112 students to our final enrollment date, it looks like we only lost 2 students?
Yes, now we have lost and gained in that, but
Yeah.
that's our total loss. And we did have a little bit lighter. We normally lose about 2% per year, and we did not feel that total enrollment drop this year.
So I shouldn't say we lost 2 students, a net loss of 2 students.
A net loss,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
because we do have some schools that have, that fluctuate quite a bit. 10 students come in
Right.
one day, 10 students leave the next, and,
Sure.
yes. So, and then another thing I wanted to just touch on, if our kinder class, let's say we have a low birth rate, year, like maybe it is a 177 year, we know birth rates are low across the state, or maybe of our current K through 2, K through 2nd grade, our lowest one is 208. The difference between 231 and 208, yes, we don't wanna lose any students, but we're hoping that it's still at least in the low 200s, that we don't have 150, kinder class come in, because we've staffed for higher numbers than that. So that would be something that we would definitely need to adjust the budget for next year. Although I went back and looked at 10 years of kinder classes just to feel more comfortable in this, and we're really only off by about 24 students if we were to have a lower class. But you never know, there could be something in the water that people have a lot of babies or people don't. So
We're saying COVID-19 lockdown.
We'll
We're
see.
gonna have 5 new babies.
I mean, we had some fire babies too after the old fire, so.
Exactly.
So, and you can see sometimes just between grade spans, our 4th and 5th grade classes are gonna be relatively small next year. They kind of say, oh, those teachers get a little bonus, and where the 6th, 7th, 8th they're all staying pretty, we do have a higher percentage that don't enter 6th grade, but then, you can see why maybe, if you look at my number from the previous slide, well, why did you only budget a 1% decline? I wanted to show you this is the why. We don't expect it to not follow trend, we just have some pieces of data in there that affect that number. Okay. So, with the uncertainties of building the budget, I was asked to provide about 5 different scenarios of revenue. And so I did, and it was everywhere from the best case, which is the Department of Finance version, no cuts to education. And then I kind of labeled them, next best case, first worst case, second worst case, and really worst case, although technically there is worse cases than these, but why go there, because I don't think.
Don't make me cry today.
Yeah, so, and I don't even think some of these second worst cases, looks like with what's going on with the negotiations may happen. Although guidance from the San Bernardino County Superintendents of Schools, the above scenario is what I was actually guided to build the budget on. So we want that county approval, so we're going to follow, the rules that they set. They're our oversight, and so we built the budget on what I kind of labeled the second worst case scenario. And it is the May revise, which is a 2.31 COLA, but then that COLA taken away, and then, by virtue of the 10% cut, which we've talked about this in the other board meetings, so I won't go line for line for line. The one thing that was really tough to, and I had, I didn't argue, but I had some conversations, friendly conversations back and forth. They're applying the 10% cut in every budget year. And, I mean, so when you have to budget for a 10% cut, then another 10% cut, then another 10% cut, then another 10% cut, I mean, that's really, is that really going to happen?
A 40% cut.
And so it makes it hard to build multi-year projections, to plan what kind of, we knew before COVID-19 that we had some really tough budget decisions to make.
Yeah.
And so it really, now it's like,
40%? Yeah, that ain't gonna happen.
yeah, and so it starts wearing on people. They're like, well, you know, you said this was gonna happen, but it really didn't. And so I was really discouraged that we had to build the multi-years this way, because I don't think anyone thinks it's going to happen, so why go there? But then that'll be something we can talk about at budget adoption, because one of the nice things maybe to just smooth this over is that we don't have to have specific items listed
Right.
in, okay,
The cuts.
to reach that 10% every year.
This is what we're
This
cutting.
is exactly what we'll do, because then people, the community gets upset. It's going to be a blanket, and there's a slide for this. Okay, if this really does happen, then it's that we've equated it into a lump sum dollar amount, and we will address it when it does.
Right.
Okay, so that saves us from, if you go back to
Scaring
2012,
people.
13 and say, you know, every school's closed, or, you know, so I mean, it's a little bit tough. So we have, I didn't produce them all, because we really, knowing what might happen on Monday, you know, at some point you have to stop, because you wanna just wait for the real numbers. And, so we have, I have the LCFF actual dollar amount behind all these scenarios, but even what we might have on Monday isn't any of these anyway. So if the closest what this, of this, the Senate version is our best case, which was the Department of Finance. So, the one area that kind of, has some uncertainty in this though, no matter, even if it's best case, is, I've applied all these scenarios with enrollment and ADA being constant. And we know that those two numbers may be a variable that is, that could change. We would let, I don't know, we can do the math and have, you know, thousands different combinations
Right.
of, well, what if our enrollment does this, you know, and they don't hold us harmless, then ADA does this. So, I mean, what we built the budget on is an enrollment and ADA being, kind of a constant number. So, there's that, even before, COVID-19, our enrollment, our staffing that goes along with the enrollment, and what will, our declining enrollment, when will it bottom out? You know, that's been issues that we've been having to talk about. And then, let's see, okay. So one of the items that we discussed at the county and in different meetings is with the economic downturn that's been a factor due to the pandemic, is how sensitive is our community to that? You know, even if there was a vaccine tomorrow, what the damage, a lot of economic damage has been done, how fast do we bounce back, and how sensitive is our community to that? So I went back and looked at the years where we had the highest enrollment decline, and I've labeled them there for you. And then thought about, well, what happened in the economy in response to those years? Is it related this because of that? I don't know, but I just thought, you know, it's worth the conversation on having. So, and you know, we had an enrollment decline over 5% in 2008, 2009 from the prior year, and December 2007 was the start of the Great Recession. In 2008, gas prices reached an historic high. In 2012, another sharp decline in enrollment was the housing bubble. and then another spike in gas prices. I mean, just from being a mom up here and talking with friends, I remember, you know, kids, friends were moving off the hill, my dad can't afford to go up and down the hill anymore, gas is too expensive, you know, and then, or we can't afford our house anymore. So, is there, what's the direct correlation? I didn't, drill down.
Cause in the conversations with community members and things like that, people moving out of California, you look at what tax was implemented in what year as well, because you have the gas tax, the 1%, and all these start adding up, and how many of our families moved to Idaho, to Colorado, to Montana, because one more tax was added to the layer of California's system.
Yes.
And I think that also correlates, because we do have a lot of families that left not to go down to the bottom of the hill, or further east. Well, they went east to Idaho, you know.
And so California right now is experiencing, you know, net migration of, you know, more people moving out than moving in, at the highest rate since 2010. So birth rates are decline statewide. And then one of the things I wanted to point out, what gives us a little comfort in that one, you know, smaller decline, is really our 10-year lowest decline for year over year was under 2%. You know, our highest was 6.34, but we have had years where we, you know, haven't, and that could be a direct result of birth rates more than people moving. Okay, so this is got a lot of numbers on it, but there is no other way. Sometimes you just have to have those on there. And I just wanted to, I don't think we should go scenario by scenario, because we already know now, since we printed this, that we're going to get different news on Monday. But I just wanted to show you some of the, how large the numbers are. So it gives us a little bit of comfort in that. We're not the only district going through this. Is the state really going to have every other district in California not be able to meet its financial obligations? So right now, our 1920 estimated LCFF is just over 30 million, or just under 31, more like it. So with that kind of the second worst case scenario, which I built the budget on, you can see what the LCFF revenue is year after year after year going out to 24, 25, and the cumulative revenue decline. So, you know, and you would see that compared to this year, it's cumulative $4 million revenue decline. But what that number is actually not the accurate number, because in January, when the governor had his January proposal and we compiled the second interim budget, the second interim 2021, 21, 22, and further year, you can see what we had budgeted for those years. So based on the May revise right now, compared to what the governor's January proposal was, would be a cumulative reduction in funding for RIM of over $11 million. So how do you react to that?
I would just, I just, right now, I'm having a panic attack. I'm hyperventilating behind my mask right now.
But I think take a deep breath, because I think, I mean, and we need to talk about these numbers, because the state has done some crazy things. We know that in the past. And so, if they do, if the May revise wins, we have to have some serious conversations, but it looks like that will not be the budget. So where will it be? You know, there's best case scenario of positive revenue growth year after year, to will it be somewhere in the middle? So we will wait and see on Monday, even though we're going to have a vote, we think Monday won't be the final answer either.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's,
And then we'll wait again in August.
yeah.
So. Okay, so multi-year projections, we base these on knowns and assumptions. And we, knew what our health insurance rate increase was going to be. We budgeted 5%. I'm just gonna touch on a couple of these because we talk about them year after year after year. We budgeted a 5% increase. It came in at 4.33. Stirs and PERS costs, the governors may revise at a little bit of some relief there. We have some savings still, that we're recording every year from past negotiations. And we have the reduction of the one-time revenues, and then what we're funded on, with lottery. Okay, this is just a snapshot of our general fund revenue. You can see that 74% of our revenue does come from LCFF. So what the governor does is very important to us, and it has a large impact on our budget. Okay, and this is just a pie chart. You can look at it, and on the percentage and in the 2021 budget, in individual categories, what we have budgeted, so far. Budget is a revolving document, though, and it changes throughout the years. Throughout the months even, as we get information, staff comes or goes, or new programs and grants are received. Okay, so prior to next week's or next board meeting's fiscal solvency plan, if we just let it kind of ride as is with the May revised budget, we would be looking at an ending fund balance in 5 years of a very large number. But it almost
It's so ludicrous.
Yeah, it'd be comical because it's just not.
It's not possible.
And I think every school district and their board is having the same conversations. So it's almost, you don't wanna laugh at it, you don't wanna make light of it, but we also we feel confident that that's not something that we're going to have to be, working on. Okay?
I wouldn't even know what to do with that.
Yeah.
To be honest, I can't even wrap my head around it.
And that was part of my conversation with the county of, why even make us go through this?
It's like torture. It's like pulling out your fingernails or something.
And when you're going well, it's probably not gonna happen, but why
But
make
they're
it
making you
calculate
do it as the
as the exercise, and it's, but, I killed a lot of paper this week. I have a lot of versions saved in Excel, so, we'll do what they say. So, I wanted to just remind everyone, though, prior to the coronavirus pandemic and the aftermath of the state economic shortfall, we were looking at ending fund balances of, just about in the whole being $1 million and 2.5 million. So if we're looking at our best case scenario, this actually gets a little bit better. Like if the Senate version of the budget passes, these numbers improve a little bit.
Right.
Okay, not enough to not have to do some work.
Right.
But they improve a little
bit. But it's a little bit more manageable.
It's more manageable, yes. So I want you to fall back on this slide, not the other one.
Yeah.
Question as far as the slide, does it include the money from the CARES Act?
This one, no. But then if the Senate version passes, that CARES Act money might not come because we wouldn't have the state cuts. We would assume there wouldn't be relief for the state cuts with that money.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
There's a lot of
That's a good
variables.
question.
Yeah. Okay. One thing that is actually, we used to talk about this in a very, very, bad way. Although it's probably going to become our friend, because the way the Senate and the Assembly is negotiating with the governor is to do some accounting tricks on their end.
Right.
Instead of making budget reductions, to actually just defer some money, which it doesn't follow accounting theory.
Right.
On debits and credits.
And it makes the audit harder, right?
Not on my end.
No, on the other end.
On the state's end?
Yeah.
I don't have to do that. So what they do is we record the receivables, but then they don't record the corresponding payable.
Right.
So, they just pay our payments late. So what we would have to do is go to, CSBA's, funding source. We used Piper Jaffrey, last time, it was in 2013, I pulled up some old emails. And we would get loans to cover our, to cover these payments.
Right,
So the cost to us though isn't interest, it's not free.
right.
It's, you're still paying like, almost like you're refinancing your house,
Right.
you're paying underwriters and things like that. But I would rather have a $30,000 to $40,000 bill than a $2 million cut every year to our revenue. So this is a way that they're really fighting to try to get the governor to, buy the state some time, to see what the economy
See what
does.
and see what the tax revenue in July comes in,
Yeah.
and then it's a more accurate conversation.
Yes, so, where before we were like, oh, deferrals,
Right.
it's horrible, now we're like, please only do deferrals. So, but you can see here, this is what it would be estimated, they would pay our June and July, then our April and August, then our, May and September, and I asked someone to look, at my PowerPoint, and they're like, well, how do they decide, it doesn't seem to make any sense. And I said, well, it does on their end, on probably their cash stream. So their cash flow on when they get their money and taxes come in. So, it would look something like this. From my understanding is the Senate's version is more drastic from when this slide was published, and, may have more deferrals in it and deeper, but we would just borrow that much more. Doesn't mean that we don't still look at budget reductions.
Right, we still have to.
But we at least, we just monitor cash and it's a little bit more work, but it's worth having this scenario than a budget reduction. Okay, the budget committee update. Our next meeting is on June 18th, 2020. The committee has identified $654,583 of reductions to the budget over a 2-year period, starting next fiscal year. The reductions are largely layoff of positions. And depending on what LCFF scenario we will receive and what our actual enrollment in 2021 is, the amount of reductions at this point wouldn't be sufficient.
Right.
So we would be going back and saying, let's dive a little bit deeper, and see what we can get out of that meeting.
Jenny, have we heard anything yet about has a decision made, because I forgot to ask this question yesterday, about the possibility if you sell your surplus property of being able to put that into
That
your
would be, well, we'll know when the governor signs the budget,
Okay.
if that flexibility has been added.
Okay. Are you hearing anything? I forgot to ask the question.
We
Notice-
heard about it around the
lot,
Native Revise,
yeah.
and now everything else is around restoring some of the cuts.
Okay,
And, I haven't heard anything, I haven't heard an update.
just because
That's a
it
good
might
question.
benefit us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanna remind you that all districts in California are facing a similar financial outlook with negative ending fund balances after this current budget year. So we're definitely not alone. That's why it's, I don't think we rush to any type of, we need to find $13 million or any kind of conversations like that. But, the state's done some funny things in the past. So, and deficits, applied deficits and, deferrals, and, we're just going to kind of hope for the best, and see where we go. I do have, the multi-year that I just gave you some bullet points. I didn't put anything, I knew there was a lot to talk about, so I didn't wanna talk about, just normal, this is LCFF, this is how much we paid in maintenance, this is how much we paid for special ed, but, it's in the budget, in the state form, so it's also summarized in the Excel spreadsheet. I did one prior to the fiscal solvency resolution, and one, with those in there. And the ones with that would be what, if we have to keep this budget scenario, is what I would turn into the county.
Okay.
And the next steps would just, we kind of already talked about a couple of these. We would submit the budget and supporting documents to the county office after, bringing it to you on the 25th. July through September, we are closing the books and preparing for the fall audit. We would prepare a state budget revision in August. We're assuming that that's not going to change. We're continue to collaborate, of course, with employees, continue the budget committee into next year, monitor enrollment and staffing, and then, I think the best thing we can do is be flexible and know that there's unknowns exist out there.
Oh, sorry, yes. Sorry.
And then I guess, do you have any questions?
I think, to be honest, just like with the whole reopening and the uncertainty and having to be flexible, I mean, to be honest, until we have definitive, and the governor actually signs it, because God help us if there's no reconciliation, it's going to be ugly. Not that anybody's saying that, it's just the fact that until he actually signs something with compromise, we can sit there like you just did and make thousands of scenarios of what ifs, but it's pointless, you know. Not to say that we aren't having it. What I'm saying is that the 3 million is what we've had been grappling with, and we've been, you know, you've been telling us and showing us that that's the number that we're really going. And I can deal with that, but the other stuff, I'm like,
Yeah.
it's.
That's why it's like, do we even put it in there? But, you know, my presentation to you is also scrutinized as part of
No, I
oversight,
think
so if, you know, and
No, you
so we
gave
have,
us
we have to
the
balance, we have to
yeah.
balance that, and
And I love that it's only the second worst case scenario.
Yeah.
That's the part that just, so anyways, yeah. And I understand that we have work to do to reach, you know, our end of, budget committee needs to do some work. Board needs to do some work.
Anything else? Okay, well, thank you, Jenny. We'll move on to 10.4, setting direction. Discuss the opportunity for November 2020 general obligation bond, GO bonds, measure, Board of Trustees. Okay,
I'm just sort of just in shock right now with the $50 million. So, okay, so we need to discuss if we want to go for a bond measure in November because Measure A did not pass.
that's correct.
And so let's.
Would you like me to start?
Yes, please,
I'll
Natalie.
start. I just don't think it's the right time for our community to go for a bond measure again. There's too much uncertainty in our lives, in the school district's lives, in their lives, that the timing isn't right. I appreciate all of our efforts in going for Measure A prior, and obviously that was before COVID-19, and it also did not pass, but I think that we did a good job communicating to our community what our needs were and asking them for support, and they weren't there at that time, and I don't think that the condition of the community is any better right now to be paying increased taxes for anything. So I'm opposed to it.
I agree. I think that this is the wrong time, the wrong environment. We have small businesses up here that are just hurting and trying to just reopen, and so I think we need to be sensitive to that. We have families that haven't worked that we need to be sensitive to. I think that with Measure A, because we really did it ourselves, that we keep everything and we just revive it when the time is right, and just follow the same template and do what we did, do it, I don't know, and revise how we did it, so maybe it's a little more effective in capturing 150 votes. Whatever, but I think that at this time I'm opposed to going after after a bond as well.
I would just piggyback on that the need hasn't changed.
And it's going to
we still need our
increase.
facilities to be improved, and we all, or at least I'll speak for myself, I stand behind the fact that we need support in being able to do that from our community.
We just
now is
we
just not
just
the
need
time.
to put it on hold. I think it's on hold.
I think I would, well, absolutely, I agree. It's probably the wrong time to go after something like this. We tried and we gave a really good go of it in March, for the March ballot, and the community support wasn't there. And it's disheartening to make a decision like this because our school district is in dire need. This is a bond that, you know, we're not looking for a bond for the sake of it. These are really needed changes in our school district. But I think you're right, we do need to be sensitive to what the community will tolerate. And I think going forward as well, it's important to be able to say that we listen to all of the feedback from Measure A. Although it felt like there was overwhelming support at the ballot box, it turned out that we fell just a little bit short. And the opposition that people had to it, I think we need to make adjustments for that. Even so, go so far as to consider whether in the future we go for a bond or possibly a small parcel tax. There was surprisingly some people, we thought the threshold for parcel taxes was so much higher, and it turns out some people felt, well, I would have preferred it to be a parcel tax because then we as a community aren't paying interest on those taxes
Right,
paid.
and I think though that we could put out a survey with an explanation, because the whole idea of a parcel tax is you collect the money, and you might have a project that like a Rim High project, which is millions of dollars.
Mhm.
How long will that take to collect the money in order to do a big project like that? And so an education of what a parcel versus bond, the pros
Right.
and cons of both, and putting it via a survey out there to our community
Right.
will give better feedback on what our community would rather have, which is a bond or a parcel. Because there's people that don't want the parcel tax.
Exactly.
Unless we put parameters to sunset it. But then if you sunset after, say, 5 years, does that give you enough money to do the
the changes
$60
needed.
million plus worth of repairs and to increase technology, increase a sustainable program? So I think when we get to that point to redo this, we put out a survey, but really
Mhm.
have to look at how much will parcel tax help us? Because
Right.
what I heard was they don't want the parcel tax a lifetime.
Right.
So,
And I think as well, I think right now the time is our focus, if we as a board are going to be working towards increasing funding in any way, I think we have to direct all of those efforts at the state level as opposed to looking to the community to help us out. At this time. We need both, we need state support and community support, but I think right now we should be focusing all of our efforts on state funding.
and I wanna clarify, I mean, we can always, like, put parcel tax on the ballot again after 5 years and see if it passes. But the whole idea is to try to build a schedule of projects,
Right.
the 60 million plus worth of projects, on a basis where they all can be accomplished in a timely manner with the highest priority getting in there, and some of those are very costly. And
Yeah,
so,
yes.
and what happens if you try to put that schedule together and you have a sunset on your parcel tax and it doesn't pass again? You know, then you're really, oh, wow, okay, poor little school that didn't get touched yet. It's just,
And you're right, the parcel taxes have limitations on them, particularly for facility needs.
right,
You know, those parcel tax dollars would probably be diverted into other things, you know, such as a salary or textbook adoptions or something other than facilities. Whereas the purpose of the bonds would
Was
go
super
to,
specific,
very
facilities and
specifically to our
technology.
facility needs. But yeah, the conversation of which way to go and how much to ask for and which projects to pursue,
well,
I think needs to wait another day.
Yeah, later
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Jordana would like to speak.
Yes, please.
Couple of things. One is I'm along with you folks don't think it's the right time to be able to go after another bond measure. Additionally, though, I think that we are, as far as the community of Crestline, there was concern about having the property at the district that wasn't being used, and we're already taking steps to address that. So I think we're already taking steps that might have people look more favorably in the future at potential bond initiatives. One of the things that I found, actually, although it was discouraging that we lost with Measure A, about half of the voters were in support. So what I wonder too is those folks who are willing to pay additional property taxes to support the school district. There might be opportunity even in the near future if we were to tap into those just outside of the house. Maybe through other means, we might be able to set up targeted donations, possibly to be able to tackle some of our most needed work that was listed on the bond.
That's well said, Dana, and it's I think it's important to note that we have been listening to community feedback and are acting on it accordingly. And Dr. Bramson, do you have anything to add to this?
Yes, I do.
Let's hear it.
I am grateful for the wisdom that has been exemplified in this conversation. Particularly the sensitivity that our community is under financial duress. And we will capitalize on this in the future, knowing what we know from the work that we did in March.
Well said. Do we have anything else that we want to add to this before we put it to a vote?
Well,
I don't think
it's
we
not
need
a
to
vote,
vote.
it's
Sorry.
so let's
Just-
just poll, thumbs up if we want to put this on hold, thumbs up
Oh.
if we're on hold.
They
Okay.
My
turn,
thumb is up.
they turn their videos off, so I can't
Okay.
see.
Leslie says that.
Jordana, thumbs up if you want to put it on hold.
Thumbs up.
Okay, so
Okay,
there's your direction.
There we go. Okay. And on that somber note, we'll move forward to 11.0, our public hearing. Procedures for public hearings. Public hearings are required on specific items such as budgets. Due to the modified meeting procedures during the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, if a member of the public would like to support, oppose, or otherwise offer an opinion on the issue, an email must be submitted to the Executive Secretary of the Superintendent by 12 o'clock noon on June 11, 2020. Once the Board President opens the public hearing, written comments will be read aloud and subject to the Board's usual time limits for public comments. When public input has concluded, the Board President will close the public hearing. Have we received any public comments?
None.
Cause everybody's like in shock of that $13 million, that's what it is. They have nothing to say on that.
Do you have
Just
to read
kidding.
the form part?
No.
Okay, so we'll move forward to 11.1, Business Services 2020/2021 Proposed Budget. The public hearing is called to order at 8:11 p.m. And since we have no audience members, we will close the public hearing at 8:11 p.m.
That was awesomely short.
12.0 Action Calendar. 12.1 Superintendent, approval to add board policy BP 3471, parcel taxes per the recommendation of the California School Board Association, CSBA, fiscal impact none, pages 2 through 6.
Cindy is so moved. That coffee's really kicking in.
Natalie is our second. Just a quick clarification, we are adding a board policy regarding how parcel taxes would be approached in our school district. We are not in any way implementing a parcel tax or pursuing a parcel tax by adding this board policy. It's simply to cover what procedures we would follow as a district should we want to pursue them. Is that correct?
Thank
That
you
is
for the
correct.
clarification.
Right on,
All right.
right on, dude.
Any other discussion? All right, calling for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.2 Superintendent, approval to revise the attached list of board policies, BP, administrative regulations, AR, and Exhibit E to our policies and procedures. The revisions were provided by the California School Board Association, CSBA, pages 7 through 79, fiscal impact none.
So moved.
Cindy Gardner is our
Second.
first. Who was that?
Leslie.
Leslie is our second. Any discussion?
I'm so glad we don't have to do it.
It's a lot to read
That was
through.
a lot of pages.
Yeah.
I'm just saying is that, thank God for CSDA.
And that's pages 7 through 79 of legalese.
Yes.
And then, from that, our administrators have read through it all and figured out what's important, what's pertinent to us,
And
what
they
needs to be
get-
changed,
Yeah.
and then presented it to us to read through. And again, we do this regularly at our board meetings, but it's good that we have CSBA to lean on as well as our administration for this. Any further discussion? Calling for the vote, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.3, Superintendent, approval to adopt the 2020-2021 East Valley SELPA local plan as the basis for the operation and administration of special education programs, affirming the school district will meet all applicable requirements of special education state and federal laws and regulations and state policies and procedures, pages 80 through 120, fiscal impact none.
So moved.
Cindy's our first,
Second.
and we've got Natalie as our second.
Second.
Too bad.
Hi.
So sad.
Little slow for that. Any discussion? Michelle, you are on the East Valley SELPA board. Did you want to say anything about it?
I gave my approval at our last board meeting, and then Derek was actually, a member of the writing team, correct, for that plan? So, and someone else from our district,
Scott White.
Scott White. So we had two members from RIM that were on the plan, writing, so this is the next step, in their process to get their LCAP approved, is all 5 districts that are members of the East Valley SELPA have to approve it at their board level.
Makes sense. Any other discussion? Calling for the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. 12.4, Personnel Services, approval of the personnel page, fiscal impact budgeted, pages 121 through 123.
So moved.
Cindy's our first,
Second.
Natalie's our second.
Dana.
She's on delay.
A little bit of a delay. Any discussion? If none, calling for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. 12.5, Personnel Services, approval of the joint sunshine agreement between RIM of the World Unified School District and RIM Teachers Association, RTA, pages 124 through 126, fiscal impact none.
So moved.
Cindy's our first,
Second.
Leslie's our second. Any discussion? Calling for the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.6, Personnel Services, approval of the California School Employees Association, CSEA, proposals for negotiations, sunshine statement, for the 2020-2021 school year, pages 127 through 128, fiscal impact none.
So moved.
Cindy's our first.
I'll second.
It sounded like both of you said that.
They did.
I'll
That's
give
okay.
it to Dana. Any discussion?
Who's the second?
It was Dana.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, calling for the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.7, Personnel Services, approval of the RIM of the World Unified School District's proposals for negotiations with the California School Employees Association, CSEA, for the 2020-2021 school year, pages 129 through 130, fiscal impact none.
So moved. No, give
Cindy's
it
our first, I already wrote it.
golly. give it first.
Natalie will be our second. Any discussion? If none, calling for the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.8, Personnel Services. Approval of the Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, between RIM of the World Unified School District and the California School Employees Association, CSEA, to add the noon duty assistant classification to the collective bargaining agreement between the district and CSEA, pages 131 through 132. Fiscal impact approximately $7,600, unrestricted general fund personnel. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Natalie's our first.
Second.
Second.
Cindy's our second.
Trying to move this along.
Any discussion? If none, calling for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.9, Personnel Services. Approval of the Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, between Rim of the World Unified School District and the California School Employees Association, CSEA, to alter the job description and title of the Administrative Secretary, Special Services / Categorical Projects to Administrative Assistant to the Office of Special Services, pages 133 through 137. Fiscal impact approximately $10,386, unrestricted general fund personnel.
So moved.
Cindy's our first.
Second.
Second.
Natalie's our second.
We're going.
Any discussion? If none, calling for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.10, Personnel Services. Approval of the Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, between Rim of the World Unified School District and the California School Employees Association, CSEA, to alter and combine the job descriptions and titles of the Child Nutrition Lead Elementary, Child Nutrition Lead Intermediate, and Child Nutrition Lead RHS to Child Nutrition Lead. Pages 138 through 142. Fiscal impact approximately $10,678, unrestricted general fund personnel.
So moved.
We've got Natalie as our first. Do we have a second?
Dennis.
Daniel will
I'll
be our
second
second. Any discussion? If none, calling for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.11, Personnel Services. Approval of the Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, between Rim of the World Unified School District and the California School Employees Association, CSEA, to alter the job description and title of Child Welfare and Attendance Specialist / Homeless and Foster Liaison to Student Services and Personnel Specialist. Pages 143 through 147. Fiscal impact approximately $1,980, unrestricted general fund personnel.
So moved.
Cindy's our first.
Second.
Natalie's our second. Do we have a motion, do we have any discussion? If none, calling for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.12, Personnel Services. Approval of the tentative agreement between Rim of the World Unified School District and the California School Employees Association, CSEA, to increase the classified salary schedule 1.5%, to change the vacation accrual formula, and to restore 2 furlough days to classified employees working 195 days per year, pages 148 through 167. Fiscal impact, approximately $149,103, unrestricted general fund.
So moved.
Cindy's our first.
Second.
Natalie's our second. Any discussion for this? Seeing none, calling for the vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.13, Personnel Services. Approval of the Certificated Management, Classified Management, and Classified Confidential Salary Schedules. The increase to the salary schedules is 1.5% effective July 1st, 2019. Also included is a $50 cell phone stipend and a $100 increase in longevity per specified years of service effective July 1st, 2020. Pages 168 through 174. Fiscal impact approximately $54,424, unrestricted general fund personnel. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Natalie's our first. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Dan.
Dan is our second. Discussion? Seeing none, calling for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.14, Educational Services. Approval of the change in grading language for grades K through 5 on Administrative Regulation AR and Board Policy BP 5121 due to the new standards aligned report card, pages 175 through 198. Fiscal impact none.
So moved.
Cindy's our first.
Second.
Natalie's our second. Do we have any discussion for this? Seeing none, we will call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.15 Business Services, approval of resolution number 19/20-15 to readopt parent paid transportation program and establish ridership fees for the 2020-2021 school year, pages 199 through 201. Fiscal impact to be determined. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Natalie's our first.
Second.
Cindy's our second. Discussion.
Okay, so you need to set rider fees, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so last year we approved with a $10 increase. Wait, I have
Last
to
year-
get to the page, sorry. Go ahead.
Let's invite Jenny Haberlin to the conversation.
Are you bringing up the application or what the fees are?
Yeah, 202. Wow, I passed it, sorry.
I don't think it's actually on here.
I don't think it's in the,
No.
yeah, 199 to
I have
201.
to go on the website. I have what they were in 1819, and I didn't, so you know, I thought I brought an application. I did. It's right here, what the current fees are. I was like, I thought I had it, and I did. Currently, we did not increase the prices from 1819 to 1920. The prices are, for the first child, $245, second child, $227, and third child, $209. They've been the same price since the 2017-18 school year.
Yeah, we need to increase those fees. Our transportation costs are going up, and I understand that it's a really hard time for families, but our maintenance, our staff, everything just keeps going up and up.
And just,
And we have free and reduced bus passes, so,
I'd just like to add some data. To date, we've sold 1,903 bus passes. Of those, the percent that are free or reduced is 71.78% of our ridership
it's free and
is
reduced.
free reduced. So, you know, an increase, you know, it doesn't equate to a lot of dollars, although it's dropped in the bucket because of the amount of riders that fall into the free or reduced category.
And reduced is a percentage, correct? So if we increase for all, the reduced goes up a little bit too, or no?
It normally does, but you can also set that price. You can set it to not have an increase where the paid does. It's really, and it's your prerogative.
Jenny, can you repeat the percentage again of the free and reduced, kind of garbled here?
71.78.
Thank you.
I think that, I could be wrong, but last year when we went through this discussion, you had presented a little bit of information on like how much money we would
It's like 100.
get, by doing some increases, correct?
Yeah, at the budget committee this year, we looked at what would a small, $10 increase, you know, what kind of revenue would that generate? And it's right around $8,000 or $9,000 total.
So if we were to lose, say, one student along the way from some sort of parent having a tip about us raising bus passes, we would lose with one student, that ADA would more than offset the increase in revenue.
ADA definitely, you know, would be
Huge loss.
a huge loss compared to the revenue the bus passes generate.
That's a good question, Dana.
Yeah. Thank you.
Our survey showed that 10% of parents kids that rode the bus this year will not ride next year.
So we're already looking at a 10% decrease.
We're already looking at a loss, and then we don't know what they're going to do if they have to wear a mask on the bus because we can't do physical distancing. And then the opposite of that is if we had to do physical distancing and we did satellite stops, how many parents would just drive their kids to school anyways, because I gotta already drive them to a satellite?
Well, and as.
There's a lot of unknowns.
Right, and yes, our transportation costs are ridiculous, and no, we're not funded appropriately for it, but $8,000 to $9,000, again, I think this is the same discussion we had last year, is it worth increasing it to potentially have a student not go to school that?
And one thing to add is, of our total ridership, if you just want to, we have 531 fully paid riders. So,
So out of the 2,000 or so families in our district, 531 paid
correct.
the full price.
Of the 1,900 riders.
Right.
And some of those families have multiple students in the district, right?
Yeah, there's currently only 6 free passes given to the 4th or higher students, so we don't have as many 4, 5, or 6 children households that ride the bus.
Right.
So,
Okay.
They bring their own bus.
I don't know, I'm for increasing the pass, but that's by $10. That was that was something that we were discussing in the budget committee. Cause when you start adding up reality of trying to gain more money and how 71% are free and reduced anyways, we could set the reduced price and keep it the same, but full price we raise by $10.
So that affects that 500 and
Right,
over
but
families.
it's something, and if you're talking about drops in the bucket, then that could be tires, it could be, some maintenance thing that we need for buses. So we could, in order to accommodate those families that are free and reduced.
What
set
is the reduced pricing?
right now, reduced, it's not a staggered price, it's just $125 per reduced rider.
And so we could keep that fee? And
So just to be clear, it wasn't that I thought $8,000 was a drop in the bucket. It was, cause I think that there's a lot, in the classroom, if I got $8,000,
Exactly.
that would be crazy.
Right.
So it's more a matter of my concern of potentially having reduced ADA as a result of even a nominal $10. It could be
I
something
think
that
that,
puts a single family over the edge, and now we've offset whatever kind of
$10
increase in
for the
revenue.
entire year, I think, is able to be absorbed by 500 and some odd parents.
I think it's a good point that Dana brings up, because our margin of loss is pretty much one student. If we lose one student over an increased bus pass fee,
$10 for an entire year.
if that,
That is less than the cost of driving a kid to school.
but if it pushed one parent or one student over the edge, we would lose that ADA for the entire year.
I don't think $10 is going to lose one student, not out of the 500 and something.
It's a hard bet to make, though.
I think that based on the response from parents in past increases, when we did a significant increase one year.
Our largest increase was in 2003, 2004, the price was $40. That next year, it went up to $250.
Right.
And then it went down
That's
to
huge.
$150, and then it went back up in little small increments, 5, 10, 5, 10, to where in 11, 12, it went up to 205, stayed at 225 for 6 years, and then went to 245.
I think that they're not
And
gonna not come to
Jenny,
school,
are
I think that they're
Jenny,
going to get driven to school.
Go ahead, Leslie.
Jenny, you mentioned that fuel prices have been reduced over the last year.
They have, because we don't, our buses aren't gasoline or diesel, they're compressed natural gas, and the compressed natural gas prices did go down slightly. They fluctuate with.
Can you, sorry. Can you give us an estimate or a guesstimate on the reduction in cost in the fuel?
I would have to get that and send it to you later. I did not bring year-over-year, CNG gas
Of
prices
course.
today.
Of course,
Okay.
no problem.
But I can.
Thank you.
Natalie?
I don't know that I have a great deal more to add.
So somebody needs to make some motion, and if it, so if I make a motion to set the bus fee for full pass at $10 more and keep the reduced at the current level, that would be my motion. If nobody decides to second that, then the motion dies and somebody else can make a motion. So that's my motion and that's what's on the floor.
So Cindy's proposed a $10 increase to our full bus price passing from $245 to $255, and then for each subsequent
Right.
child, $10 increase as well,
Right.
correct?
Right.
And then to keep reduced pricing at the same $125 per student.
That's my compromise on that.
Is there anyone that seconds that motion?
So then say the motion dies.
It does appear as if that motion's died. Does anyone have a subsequent motion they'd like to put forth?
I would move that we keep the busing prices the same.
Dana's moved that we keep bus pricing the same, keep no changes from the prior year. Is there anyone that seconds that motion?
I second that motion.
We have a first from Dana who's proposed it and a second from Leslie Bramson. So we will go ahead and vote on that motion unless someone has we'll vote on this one, I guess we'll have to do.
Do we discuss it first?
We
What
already
could happen-
discussed
Do
it.
you want more discussion?
There could be more discussion. There could also be a substitute motion put in place to block yours.
No,
Before.
no, it's a vote. It's now a vote because it's been seconded. So now we have to vote on this.
I believe under Robert's Rules of Orders, a substitute motion could be put into place when a motion like this is put forward. But I might be mistaken.
I think you have to complete the process and then.
Because if we were to complete this vote, then that would end everything.
Yeah,
But if there was a substitute motion, it would allow us to continue debating. And I believe that's what Robert's
Well,
Rules
no,
of Orders outlines.
but we can have discussion on this motion right now. We can have
Of course.
further discussion
Mhm.
and then call for the vote. So does anybody have anything else to bring to the table on this, or are we done with discussion on bus pass? Okay, so let's call for the vote.
Let's go ahead and vote on that then. All in favor of keeping bus pricing the same as it was last year per Dana's motion, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
So let's record this vote here. It sounds like Natalie Lindeman was aye, correct?
Correct.
Jordan Zarate, aye. Dana Ridland
Aye. Aye.
and Leslie Bramson, aye. Any
Aye.
opposed?
Cindy Gardner, I
Cindy Gardner,
oppose.
nay. So looks like the motion carries, not unanimously, but it does carry. And with that, we'll move forward to 12.16, Business Services. Approval of the Education Protection Account, Resolution number 19/20-16, pages 202 through 206, fiscal impact, approximately $3,312,278, component of LCFF base revenue. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Cindy Gardner is our first,
Second.
Natalie Lindeman is our second. Discussion. This is an annual thing that we do. It's not as if we're spending this money here now. It's just, Jenny, do you want to say anything about the education protection account?
Yes, with the state's budget, and how LCFF is funded, just a percentage of LCFF in total is carved out and kind of, accounted for, under this statute. It's not any additional money for RAM, it's not spending it in any additional way. It's more the state's accounting of when they passed, Proposition 30, I believe, and how, the different pockets and the rainy day fund and how that all works together at the state's funds. We're required to, of our total LCFF, kind of have it in different buckets, so.
That's a good way to put it, different buckets, yeah. Any other discussion? Thank you, Jenny. Calling for the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.17 Business Services, approval of resolution number 19/20-18 to authorize temporary borrowing between funds of Room School District, pages 207 through 211. Fiscal impact none.
So moved.
Cindy's our first,
Second.
I'll go with, was that Leslie there?
Yes.
Leslie is our second. Any discussion? I'll just clarify that we are not borrowing right now funds between, we're not borrowing between funds today. What we're doing is allowing our chief business official to borrow between funds should the district need to in the future. We talked about how the state is probably going to be looking at deferrals for school districts, and it may be helpful for us to borrow between existing funds. Is there anything needs to be added to that?
Perfect. Said it perfectly, Jordan.
Thank you. We'll call for that vote then. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.18, Business Services. Approval for review and discuss the 2020-2021 fund balances above the minimum reserve requirement, page 212. Fiscal impact, none.
So moved.
Cindy is our first. Leslie is our second. Discussion.
You have, oh,
Go ahead.
okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Jenny Haberlin, yes, tell us.
You have in front of you, that we brought, and I'm sorry the folks on Zoom don't have this. I didn't, this is, think to, email it ahead of time. But we're required at the budget hearing, the same meeting date as a budget hearing, to discuss what's in reserve. A lot of times we accomplish this by, having a slide in the actual, when the multi-year projections are all up on the screen, and we talk about it then. But it does have to have its own separate agenda item. And you can see that in 2020, 2021, we do have funds set aside in the reserves, and they're labeled there for you. And we touched, the one we touched on was the amount, the $763,000 in the CARES Act. You can see in the middle of the page. And there's a sheet for each fiscal year, 2021 and 21-22, 22-23.
Thank you.
Jenny, can I get a copy of that maybe at our next meeting or sometime that's convenient?
Yes.
Or if you can email it?
Yes.
Thank you.
And one thing that we know is, just like with the budget, we know there will be changes, and these numbers will most likely, the actual identified amounts that are assigned in reserves, but the unallocated amount will change, but not the actual assigned, items that are in reserves.
Well, if it's information that'll be incorporated in what we get in a couple of weeks, then there's no need for you to do anything.
We're just reading through it.
Okay.
I'll leave time for discussion, but I'll also leave some time here for us to read through it, in case anyone has questions. And just to clarify, it looks like we have declining reserves year over year, but that's because we anticipate a declining budget year over year, is that correct? So it's still a maintenance of 3% in, well, at least the district standard reserve level?
It is because of the, incorporating the fiscal solvency plan.
Carry over to next fiscal year to address deficit spending.
Mhm. Too bad there's no CARES Act funding for the next years. Anything? Okay, let's go ahead and call for that vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? I didn't hear everyone say aye.
Oh,
I'm
I.
abstaining.
Oh, I'm sorry, what was that?
Dana, I'll abstain.
Okay, we'll have that recorded as a,
Wait, why?
She doesn't have the document.
Oh, got it.
that's perfectly fine. So that's, let's go ahead and record that. We have Natalie Lindemann, aye.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay. Cindy Gardner,
Yes,
Aye. Jordan Zarate, aye. Leslie Bramson,
Aye.
Leslie Bramson, aye. And then Dana Ridlin,
I'm abstaining.
and one abstention.
I just,
And that's understandable. So, the motion carries, and with that, we'll move on to 13.0, our consent calendar, items pulled for a separate vote and discussion to be taken into consideration during agenda item 14.0.
13.12, please.
13, 14, 13, 15, 13, 16.
13, 12, 13, 13,
14,
13, 14, 13, 15,
13, 16.
13, 16. Let me go ahead and mark all of those. Oh, okay. Are there any others that anyone would like to poll for discussion?
Yes, yes.
Okay, let's hear them.
Do we have 1311 and 1312 pulled?
We have 1312, but not 1311, so we'll pull that one there for you.
Please.
13, 14, 13, 15, 13, 16. Anything else? Okay, then, do we have a motion on 13.1, 13.2, 13.3, 13.4, 13.5, 13.6, 13.7, 13.8, 13.9, 13.10, 13.13, 13.17, 13.18, 13.19, and 13.20.
Yes, so moved.
Cindy
Second.
Garner's our first, Natalie Lindemann's our second. Any discussion? If none, calling for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. 14.0, items removed from the consent calendar. 13.11 looks like the first one. And let me read that here. 13.11, business services, approval to accept the donation from the Crestline Lake Gregory Rotary Club to Valley of Enchantment Elementary School of supplemental 5-gallon water bottles, manual pumps and caps to support students and teachers' access to drinking water in the portable classrooms throughout the day, pages 265 through 268. Fiscal impact approximately $150. Donation. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Natalie's our first, and it sounded like Leslie was our second?
Yes.
Okay. Discussion?
I'm grateful to the Crestline Lake Gregory Rotary Club in their generosity towards our students in VOE.
I think we echo
I
those
agree.
sentiments. Anything else? Calling for the vote, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item 13.12, business services, approval of a monetary donation from RIM High School PTSA to help purchase Chromebooks and a cow for Rim of the World High School, pages 269 through 270. Fiscal impact $6,200 donation. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Natalie's our first,
Second.
Leslie's our second. Discussion.
Okay, I pulled this because I'm the one that signed the check and put in the paperwork, so I have to abstain. I have a conflict of interest, so we're pulling it for me.
Sounds good.
I'm sure we're very appreciative though. And for those that are curious what a cow is, it's a Chromebook on wheels.
Yeah, and on the high school.
Could you buy us a real cow?
Maybe we could make it as a fundraiser. Get your
So,
fresh milk.
it is not the purchase of Chromebooks and a cow animal. It's a device to help carry those Chromebooks. That makes sense. We'll call for a recorded vote. Natalie Lindeman,
So, yes, approved, whatever.
aye.
What day is it? Aye.
Cindy Gardner,
I abstain, please.
abstention. Jordan Zarate, aye. Daniel Ridlin,
Aye.
aye. And Dr. Leslie Bramson,
Aye.
aye. With that, the motion carries 4 to
Yay.
1 abstention. Big thank you to Room High PTSA. Item 13.14, Business Services. Approval to contract with Painting and Decor Incorporated for the exterior repainting project at Charles Hoffman Elementary School, pages 273 through 276. Fiscal impact, approximately $63,700, unrestricted general fund maintenance.
So moved.
Cindy's our first,
Second?
Natalie's our second. Wow, this is something very exciting and needed
Super
for
excited.
CHE.
Well, I pulled it and the next one, and I don't know if we're allowed to have Jim join the discussion, but I imagine that's why he's sitting here still. Can you share with us what you are doing at CHE?
Basically, all the fascia that's fallen apart and not there anymore will be replaced. All the seams will be recaulked and then complete paint.
They can't hear you. Need to speak louder.
All the fascia is gonna be replaced at the school that's bad, rotten, or missing. And then all the painting of, all the painted surfaces now will be repainted. The brick will stay the brick color.
You're
Are
not
we
gonna
going
paint
with
the
the
brick?
same exterior color, or are we getting a different color?
We'll discuss that after, or if it gets approved.
Wonderful.
Colors are always a big question.
Yes, that's why I asked.
Please, God, don't pick the wrong blue.
Yes, let's go ahead and move
Jim,
forward. Yes? Go ahead, Leslie.
may I please ask a question?
Of course.
Is that a local vendor that is doing this? Wonderful.
No.
No, it's not a local vendor because we didn't have any local vendors
It's-
bid it, but it is the same one that did the high school.
They are within 30 miles or so of the district, correct?
Depending on what you call locally, yeah.
Yeah.
But they did do the high school modernization.
Yes.
Thank you, Jim.
Mhm.
Another question is, any
Thank you,
idea,
Jim, for your work.
assuming that we approve this, when would it take place?
It would start hopefully in the next 2 weeks.
Oh, awesome.
And
Anything
other elementary schools will follow as possible.
We're trying to plan one each year.
Awesome.
CHC was the worst
Condition.
off right now, yeah.
Right. Thank you.
I think it's wonderful that we're even planning for such a thing. It's good that we have that maintenance funds and we're prioritizing big projects when and where we can. So with that, we'll go ahead and call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. 13.15,
No,
Busy-
she would have been opposed.
I'm sorry, somebody was opposed?
I think that
Leslie.
Leslie was a delayed aye. is
It
what I
sounded
heard.
like a
No,
delayed
no,
aye.
no, I was not opposed.
Okay. Okay, for clarification, that motion passed unanimously. All voted in favor of it.
Jordan, good job.
Moving on to 13.15, Business Services, approval to contract with BJ Construction for the exterior fascia replacement at Charles Hoffman Elementary, pages 277 through 279, fiscal impact, approximately $32,000, restricted general fund maintenance.
So moved.
Cindy's
Second.
our first, and Natalie's our second.
And I pulled it, but we already discussed it in the one prior, so I have no further discussion.
Let's just do a round of applause, everyone.
Yes. Anything else? Calling for the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Item number 13.16, Business Services. Approval to ratify and proceed with the contract with FASM Creative for the mural replacement project at Rim of the World High School, pages 280 through 285. Fiscal impact not to exceed $65,000, Fund 21 and/or Fund 40.
So moved.
Cindy's our first,
Second.
Natalie's our second. Discussion.
And I put this one just for those who maybe weren't listening at the beginning, that we went to vote
Show it.
and
Show
the
it, Hannah.
community voted on these for our murals at the high school. So our murals will be restored. I was going to ask, since we're talking about it, if, is this posted on our website somewhere, or can we post it so people can see what we're gonna be looking at? Yeah?
I have to ask Lori if it's somewhere on Rim Highs, but
I thought I
it's,
saw that.
I saw the results, but I wasn't sure if it was like board information that I saw the results, or the results were somewhere public. But I think it would be great on the high school website or the district website to make sure it can be seen by all, so they know
Coming
what to expect.
attractions.
Exactly. Thank you very much for all that work towards that. And again, that is one of the partners in the mural restoration is a local artist.
that became a public document, sharing it today anyway.
Okay.
Yes.
Whether it's posted yet or not.
Okay. Hopefully it can be.
And one other clarification, we talked about it at our last board meeting, but this is money that's coming from our Measure W funds that has very specific guidelines on how that money can be spent. And
It was part of the plan.
it was part of our plan, so we had to allocate that fund. And one, we want those murals back. I think it's an important point of pride for our community. But two, you know, for anyone who's had questions, why are we spending this money on murals when there's a pandemic going on? It's money that's been planned for and allocated to, and again, the
Since
partner.
2012.
Yes, so this is a long time coming, and it's a final completion. I recognize Fund 40 there, that's Measure W, right?
Fund 21 is Measure W, Fund 40 is Capital Facility
There we go,
Project.
yeah.
But they're both restricted for facilities.
So it's money that is going to good use, and again, this is in partnership with the local vendor as well, between FASM and the artist. Any other discussion?
When is this scheduled to take place? When is it gonna happen?
Monday.
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 Great, awesome. That's exciting.
Unless we
Wonderful.
don't pass it.
Yes.
I'm just gonna sit
Oh,
there.
sorry, you have to pass it first.
Let's see the results of that. Let's call for that vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Looks like
Okay,
we'll get
Monday
a-
it is! You know what you're doing Monday now.
15.0, governance team, future agenda items planning. 15.1, time allotted for the Board of Trustees to request agenda items for future meetings. Do we have any requests?
No, just a reminder that we tabled our discussion, our board discussion on the input of what would have normally been LCAP discussion. We're just rephrasing that into setting direction, and that will be on the retreat agenda.
And that retreats in July.
July 24th.
There we go. So that's an important thing to note. Is there anything else aside from what we regularly schedule on our governance calendar? Okay, we'll stick with our governance calendar then. We put a lot of work into that, so makes sense. 16.0, future meeting dates. Regular board meeting, June 25th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. at the district office. We have our board retreat July 24th, 2020 at 9 o'clock a.m. And we have that scheduled for the Rim High School Library. I believe we'll keep that, is that correct?
We need that
Do you want to
location
change?
for physical distancing, because we're not, it's very difficult to do like an 8-hour meeting via phone.
Right, I think that's good. I think it's important to note that we may call it a retreat, that's.
It's a workshop.
It's really going to be the board discussing what we would like to see going on in the future of our school district over about, approximately 8 hours. So that's why we call it a retreat.
So we changed the location to Cabo.
Yeah, no location changes. And we have our regular board meeting, August 20th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. We have that scheduled for the Rim High School Library, and I think we'll keep that for now. If we need to change that in the future due to any restrictions put in place or any changes in law, we'll go ahead and make that determination at a later board meeting. 17.0, recess to closed session if necessary. It is necessary for us today. This is a long board meeting for us, or longer than we've normally had lately.
Talk about this.
So the Board of Trustees are hereby recessed to closed session at 8:57 p.m. We'll reconvene
Whenever.
when we're done.
Mark just gave us looks like, oh, come on, guys.
Bring your cot.
Like, for real, I'm staying longer. I saw those eyes.
Can I get you like a beverage or run errands for you or something?
Reconvene open session and call to order. The Board of Trustees are hereby reconvening open session at 9:48 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. 17.2, roll call. Trustees to identify themselves by first and last name to formally establish quorum. Jordan Zarate, Trustee Area 3.
Cindy Gardner, Trustee Area 2.
Natalie Lindeman, Trustee Area 2.
Dana Ridlin, trustee area 1.
Leslie Bramson, trustee area 1.
We have our quorum. 17.3, closed session report. Announcement of reportable actions taken during closed session. We have none to report at this time. And we'll go ahead and move on to.
Because we have to bring back your contract at the next meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So 18.0, adjournment. Do we have a motion?
So moved, adjourning at 9:49 p.m.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
Jordan Ridlin. Calling for the vote, or any discussion? None?
Please God, no.
Calling for the vote, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. The meeting was adjourned at 9:49